The chevron sequence had always sounded the same. 7 symbols, mechanical rotation, locking tones that echoed through Cheyenne Mountain like a heartbeat the SGC had learned to trust. It was routine, too routine. Colonel Jack O'Neill was already half distracted, leaning against the railing above the gate room, coffee in hand, listening to Carter rattle off telemetry that sounded important but not urgent. Routine dial to P3X 774. Geological survey. No Goa'uld activity. No ancient ruins. No reason for alarms. Until the 7th chevron locked. The Stargate didn't kawoosh. It screamed. The event horizon exploded outward in a violent spiral of red and gold energy. Not liquid, not plasma, but something that looked like light tearing itself apart. The blast slammed into the ramp hard enough to knock 2 SF guards off their feet. Warning klaxons erupted instantly, red lights flooding the room as Carter's console lit up with cascading system failures. "That is not a wormhole," Carter said, her voice tight, fingers flying across the keyboard. "That's not any known wormhole." The gate began vibrating. Not the deep, resonant hum of an established connection, but a high-frequency oscillation that rattled equipment and made teeth ache. The iris controls locked out. Power levels spiked past redline. Temporal sensors, devices Carter barely trusted on a good day, went completely insane. And then something came through. Not a ship, not a probe, not a body tumbling helplessly out of hyperspace. A blur, red and gold, faster than the eye could track. It struck the ramp with a concussive boom that cracked concrete and sent a shockwave rolling through the room. The blur skidded, tumbled once, and stopped at the base of the ramp, resolving into a human form just as gravity and physics seemed to remember they were supposed to apply. Silence fell. Smoke drifted upward from scorched metal. The Stargate's event horizon collapsed in on itself with a violent snap, leaving the ring dark and inert. Emergency power kicked in. The alarm softened, but did not stop. On the ramp lay a man, young, brown hair, red suit torn and scorched in places, lightning-shaped seams faintly glowing before fading. He was unconscious, chest rising and falling too fast, body vibrating so subtly it was almost a trick of the light. O'Neill took a slow sip of coffee. "Well," he said, "that's new." Security flooded the room, weapons trained on the figure. Dr. Fraser pushed past them, already scanning. Carter descended the stairs at a near run, eyes locked on her handheld sensors. "No Naquada," she muttered. "No symbiote. No energy signature I recognize. But," she hesitated, "his cells are emitting something. It's self-contained, like a power source folded in on itself." Daniel Jackson stared at the scorch marks along the ramp, then at the man's suit. "That symbol," he said quietly. "The lightning bolt. That's not from any mythology I know. Modern iconography. Comic book, maybe." Teal'c said nothing. He simply watched the unconscious man with the focused stillness of a warrior assessing a potential threat. The man coughed. Every weapon tightened. His eyes snapped open, and the world froze. Not metaphorically, not figuratively. Actually froze. The hum of electronics stretched into an impossible, elongated whine. Drifting dust particles hung motionless in the air. Muzzle flashes that had just begun to spark from twitchy fingers were locked in half-formed bursts of light. Carter was frozen mid-step, one foot barely touching the stair, hair suspended as if underwater. O'Neill's coffee arced in a perfect curve out of its cup, droplets glittering like stars. The man on the ramp sat up. He looked around, eyes wide. "Oh no," he said. "No, no, 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 no. This is bad. This is really bad." He stood, moving with casual ease through a room that might as well have been a museum diorama. He stepped around frozen soldiers, peered at the Stargate, tapped it lightly with a finger. The metal rippled like water, then snapped back into place. "That's not good," he muttered. "That is definitely not good." He took a breath, closed his eyes, and vibrated. The world slammed back into motion. The coffee splashed. Guns fired harmlessly into the ceiling as startled guards overcorrected. Carter stumbled, caught herself on the railing. Fraser nearly dropped her scanner. The man raised his hands instantly. "Okay, hi, nobody panic. I promise I'm not attacking you. Wow, this is not Central City." O'Neill blinked, then slowly raised an eyebrow. "You know, most people start with, 'Who are you?' and 'How did you get here?' But I feel like we skipped ahead." The man let out a nervous laugh. "Yeah, fair. Hi, my name's Barry Allen, and I think I accidentally ran into another universe." No one lowered their weapons. Carter stepped forward cautiously. "You froze time," she said. "Not relatively, not perceptually. Our sensors recorded a localized temporal suspension." Barry winced. "Yeah, that's kind of my thing. I mean, not freezing time, exactly. It's more like I move really fast. Like, really fast. Time just doesn't keep up." Daniel adjusted his glasses, studying him. "You're saying you weren't transported by the Stargate. You weren't pulled through. You entered under your own power." Barry nodded. "I was chasing something. Long story. Red lightning, bad day, science experiment gone wrong. I hit this tunnel, like a hallway made of light. I pushed harder, tried to outrun the collapse, and then," he gestured around, "military bunker, big spinny ring, a lot of very concerned people with guns." O'Neill sighed. "Carter, please tell me he's joking." Carter didn't look away from her scanner. "He's not. Colonel, his cells are generating an extra-dimensional energy field. It's self-sustaining. Whatever lets him do what he does isn't drawing power from this universe. It's carrying its own." Teal'c finally spoke. "He is a warrior who moves faster than sight." Barry glanced at him. "I mean, I prefer hero, but sure." The restraints hit him before he could blink. Trinium cuffs snapped around his wrists and ankles, pinning him to a reinforced gurney in a blink-and-you-miss-it maneuver executed by half a dozen SF guards. Carter hadn't even seen the order given. Barry stared down at the restraints, then back up at them. "Oh," he said softly. "Okay, so we're doing this." He vibrated. The cuffs fell apart, disintegrating into useless shards that clattered onto the floor. Barry didn't move from the gurney. He didn't run. He just sat there, hands open, breathing hard. "I could leave," he said. "Like right now. I won't, but I could. So maybe let's talk instead." The room was silent. O'Neill slowly set his coffee down. "Son," he said, "you just went from unknown alien threat to entirely new category of problem in about 5 seconds. So yeah, talking sounds good." Carter swallowed. "Colonel, his energy field is destabilizing local space-time, very slightly, but it's increasing." Barry's expression fell. "That's not good." "No," Carter agreed. "It really isn't." Daniel took a step closer. "Barry," he said gently, "do you know where you are?" Barry shook his head. "Underground, somewhere cold, different stars, different everything. The speed force feels wrong here, like it's punching holes where it shouldn't." "The what force?" O'Neill asked. "The speed force," Barry said. "It's complicated. Think of it like a cosmic battery / highway / rule book for running really fast without breaking reality. Teal'c tilted his head. It appears that reality disagrees. Barry laughed weakly. Yeah, it does that. Carter looked up from her scanner, eyes wide with dawning realization. Sir, she said, he didn't come through the Stargate. The gate registered a temporal shockwave because he outran the wormhole formation. He intersected the event horizon while moving faster than its causal boundary. O'Neill stared at her. In English. He ran into the Stargate, Daniel translated. Before it finished opening. Barry winced again. Wow, when you say it like that, it sounds worse. The gate room lights flickered. Deep within the mountain, systems compensated. The Stargate sat silent, dark, but something lingered around it. A faint red-gold shimmer, barely visible, like heat distortion. Carter watched it with a mixture of awe and fear. Sir, she said quietly, if he stays, this universe is going to notice. Barry swallowed. So am I under arrest, quarantined, or about to be dissected? O'Neill considered him for a long moment. Then he sighed. Let's start with a debrief, and maybe some coffee. You look like you need it. Barry smiled faintly. You have no idea. Deep in the gate's dormant ring, something ancient stirred. Not a consciousness. Not yet. But a warning. A ripple moving backward and forward through time, touching points long thought fixed. Somewhere in the galaxy, a Goa'uld system lord paused mid-sentence, skin prickling with unease. Something fast had entered his domain. Something that did not belong. Barry Allen had always thought interrogation rooms were supposed to be darker. Dim lights, one-way mirrors, menacing silence. This one looked more like a conference room that had given up on pretending it wasn't underground. Beige walls, a metal table, a pot of coffee that smelled burnt enough to be a war crime. He sat calmly, hands folded, feet tapping just slightly faster than human normal. Carter's instruments on the other side of the glass spiked every time he moved too much, so he tried to stay still. Tried being the key word. Across from him sat Colonel Jack O'Neill, leaning back in his chair like this was a dentist appointment he hadn't bothered to cancel. Daniel Jackson hovered nearby with a notepad he pretended wasn't already full. Teal'c stood against the wall, silent and immovable, eyes never leaving Barry's face. So, O'Neill said, Barry, right? Yes, Barry Allen. For the record, I usually bring ID, but I was kind of in a hurry. That seems to be a theme, Barry smiled nervously. You should see traffic back home. Carter's voice came through the speaker from the observation room. Colonel, his vitals are stable, but his energy emissions are fluctuating. Every time he accelerates, even slightly, we see micro-temporal shear. Barry winced. Yeah, that happens when I get stressed, or excited, or bored, or when someone points a gun at me. Sorry. O'Neill glanced at the armed guard just outside the door. Lower the rifle a notch, son. If he wanted us dead, we'd already be arguing about the afterlife. Teal'c inclined his head slightly. Indeed, Daniel stepped forward. Barry, you said you were chasing something. What exactly? Barry hesitated. He rubbed his hands together, then stopped when Carter's sensor spiked again. Someone like me, he said. Another speedster. Bad guy. He figured out how to break through dimensional barriers by exploiting speed-induced temporal fractures. I tried to stop him. I pushed too hard. And instead of catching him, I ended up here. And the other one? Daniel asked. Barry's eyes darted to the Stargate diagram on the wall. "I don't know," he admitted. "That's the problem." The room went very quiet. Carter's voice softened, but only slightly. "If someone else with your abilities entered this universe, they could do what I do," Barry finished. "Only without the whole trying to save people thing." O'Neill rubbed his face. "Great, because our galaxy was feeling a little under-challenged." Daniel looked thoughtful. "Barry, where you're from, what's the worst thing someone like you has ever done?" Barry swallowed. "Changed time, fixed something that wasn't meant to be fixed, saved the wrong person, lost the future." Teal'c's brow furrowed. "Time is not meant to be altered." Barry nodded. "Tell me about it." Carter tapped her console. "Colonel, I'm detecting a subspace ripple propagating outward from the gate. It's faint, but it's spreading, like a wake." Barry closed his eyes. "That's me, or rather, the speed force reacting to being somewhere it doesn't belong." Daniel frowned. "Speed force?" Barry opened his eyes. "It's hard to explain without a whiteboard in about 6 hours. Short version? It's a fundamental force tied to motion and time in my universe. It gives speedsters their powers. It also enforces rules, like don't mess with fixed points." "And this universe?" O'Neill asked. Barry exhaled. "Doesn't have it, or at least not like mine. Which means every time I run, I'm dragging part of it through reality like a knife." Carter stiffened. "You're damaging space-time." "Unintentionally," Barry said quickly. "But yeah, a little. I'm trying not to." O'Neill stared at him. "Son, our entire job is cleaning up unintended consequences. You're going to fit right in." Before Barry could reply, alarms chirped softly through the room. Not the blaring panic kind. The precise, restrained sound of something important just crossed a threshold. Carter's voice sharpened. "Sir, we're getting an unscheduled off-world activation. Incoming transmission only, no matter stream." O'Neill stood. "Patch it through." The lights dimmed slightly as a holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the room. The image resolved into a massive stone chamber, illuminated by firelight and arrogance. A tall figure stood at its center, gold armor gleaming, eyes glowing with parasitic intelligence. A Goa'uld system lord. "My loyal servants," the figure boomed, voice layered and echoing. "Attend." The transmission cut abruptly. Barry stared at the now empty air. "Okay, that guy looks like a villain." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He's worse. He's a false god." Barry blinked. "You have those too?" Teal'c stepped forward. "They enslave worlds. They rule through fear and deception, and they will have felt your arrival." Barry's stomach dropped. "Because of the time stuff." "Because of the power," Carter corrected. "They monitor energy signatures. Yours is unlike anything we've ever recorded." O'Neill crossed his arms. "Which means they're going to want you." Barry let out a humorless laugh. "Join the club," Carter's console chimed again. "Sir, I'm picking up activity across multiple gate addresses. Goa'uld ships repositioning. Increased communications traffic. It's like something just changed." Daniel looked at Barry. "In mythology, gods fear what they can't control." Barry leaned back slowly. "And I'm guessing these guys really don't like competition." Teal'c's voice was grim. "They will seek to capture you, to weaponize your abilities, or to kill you to prevent others from believing a god can fall." Barry closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of Central City, of his friends, of every time he'd made things worse by trying to make them better too fast. When he opened his eyes, his voice was quiet. I can stop them. I can run to their worlds, disarm their armies, free their slaves. I could do it in minutes. The room went still. O'Neill studied him carefully. And what happens after? Barry hesitated. People are free. Daniel shook his head slowly. Or the power vacuum creates wars that kill more than the system lords ever did. Carter nodded. Or you destabilize timelines that lead to worse outcomes. History isn't a straight line. It's a system. You pull one thread too hard. Barry finished the thought. Everything unravels. Teal'c met Barry's gaze. Freedom achieved without understanding is fragile. Barry looked at his hands. They were shaking now. I've been down this road, he said. I fix one thing, break 10 others. I hate standing still when I know people are suffering. O'Neill softened, just a little. Kid, welcome to our galaxy. The alarm sounded again, louder this time. Carter's voice came fast. Sir, a Goa'uld vessel just entered the solar system. It's broadcasting. The lights dimmed further as the transmission cut in again. The same system lord, now smiling. People of Earth, the Goa'uld said, we have felt the arrival of a new power, one unclaimed, one unbound. Deliver it to us, and your world will be spared. Barry stared at the image, jaw clenched. And if we don't? O'Neill asked. The Goa'uld smile widened. Then we will take it, as we have taken everything else. The transmission ended. Silence followed. Barry stood. Carter's sensors went wild. I'm not letting them hurt you, Barry said. I can lead them away, run circles around their fleet, buy you time. O'Neill stepped into his path. And do what? Prove them right? Show the galaxy you're a god? Barry stopped short. His entire body vibrated with restrained motion. I'm not a god, he said fiercely. I'm just fast. Daniel's voice was calm. Then act like it. Not like something they can worship or fear. Act like a man who understands consequences. Barry breathed in, breathed out. What do you need me to do? He asked. O'Neill didn't answer immediately. He looked to Carter, to Daniel, to Teal'c, then back to Barry. For now, he said, you stay put. You learn. You don't run unless we tell you to. Barry nodded slowly. I can do that. Outside the mountain, the Goa'uld ship adjusted its orbit, weapons charging. And deep within the Stargate network, ancient systems long dormant began to register an anomaly, moving faster than prophecy. Barry Allen had never been good at waiting. Even when he was trying to be patient, time always seemed to stretch around him, seconds bloating into awkward eternities. Now, sitting in a reinforced observation room buried beneath a mountain, that sensation was magnified tenfold. Not because nothing was happening, but because everything was happening too slowly. On the other side of the glass, Carter paced between consoles, juggling data streams that refused to make sense. Temporal graphs spiked and dipped erratically whenever Barry so much as shifted his weight. Daniel stood with her now, pointing at symbols and timelines, arguing softly about cause and effect. Teal'c remained near the door, arms folded, eyes closed, listening to something only he could hear. O'Neill leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching Barry like a man trying to decide whether to trust a loaded weapon that could think. Above them all, far beyond Cheyenne Mountain, a Goa'uld mothership hung in Earth's orbit like a threat carved into the sky. Barry broke the silence first. So, he said, trying for casual and missing by a mile. That ship, how long before it starts shooting? Carter didn't look up. Minutes, hours, depends on how confident they are that fear alone will work. And if it doesn't, then they escalate. Barry nodded. They always do. Daniel glanced at him. You've dealt with tyrants before. Yeah, Barry said quietly. Just usually ones who wore masks instead of crowns. Teal'c opened his eyes. The Goa'uld do not rush when they believe victory is inevitable. They prefer their prey to understand helplessness. Barry's jaw tightened. I don't like helplessness, O'Neill snorted. Nobody does, but sometimes it keeps you alive long enough to fight back. Carter finally turned toward Barry, her expression serious. We need to talk about what happens if you run. Barry raised an eyebrow. I thought we already did. We talked about consequences in theory, she said. I need you to understand them in practice. She tapped a control, and the glass wall became a projection screen. Stars filled the space, lines of light connecting them in a complex web. This is the Stargate network, Carter explained. Thousands of worlds connected by stable wormholes. Travel is instantaneous, but history isn't. Events cascade. Uprisings lead to counterattacks. One system lord falls, another moves in. We've spent years learning which interventions save lives and which ones make things worse. Barry studied the web. And I'd be a wrecking ball. Yes, Carter said bluntly. A very fast one. Daniel stepped in gently. Barry, the Goa'uld thrive on myth. They pretend to be gods because it keeps people obedient. If you appear everywhere at once, undoing their armies in seconds, what do you think their slaves will believe? Barry swallowed. That I'm another god. And gods, Daniel continued, become targets or replacements. Teal'c's voice was low. The Jaffa have been conditioned to serve power. If you become that power, even unwillingly, they will follow, until you fall. Barry ran a hand through his hair. I don't want that. I don't want worship. I just want people safe. O'Neill pushed off the wall. Kid, intentions don't matter half as much as results. Trust me, I've screwed that one up more times than I care to count. The room shook faintly, not an explosion. A ripple. Carter's head snapped up. Sir, I'm detecting a localized temporal fluctuation. High altitude, upper atmosphere. Barry's heart skipped. That wasn't me. Teal'c's eyes narrowed. Then you are not the only anomaly. Carter's fingers flew. The Goa'uld ship just activated something. It's not a weapon. It's a probe, temporal in nature. Daniel frowned. They're experimenting. Barry stood abruptly. No, they're testing. O'Neill held up a hand. Testing what? Barry looked at him, fear flickering behind his eyes. Me. The fluctuation intensified. Satellites glitched. Atomic clocks across the globe desynchronized by fractions of a second. To most of the planet, it was nothing. A rounding error. A hiccup. To Barry, it was a scream. They're poking time, he said. Carelessly, Carter stared at the data. They're using ancient tech, something crude but powerful. Chronosensors, Daniel murmured. The ancients warned against using them without understanding. Teal'c's jaw tightened. The Goa'uld understand only conquest. Barry clenched his fists. The room vibrated subtly in response. I can stop it, he said. I can run up there, disable the probe. No one would even know. O'Neill stepped in front of him again. And if they see you, they already know I'm here. And if disabling it creates a bigger ripple, Barry hesitated, just for a second. That's the risk, he admitted. Carter's voice softened. Barry, the first time we ever stepped through the Stargate, We thought technology would solve everything. It didn't. It just made our mistakes bigger. Barry laughed weakly. You should meet my friends. Another tremor rippled through the room, stronger this time. Carter's console screamed alarms. Temporal feedback is increasing. The probe is destabilizing local time. If it continues, we're looking at regional time dilation. Best case, worst case. She didn't finish. Barry closed his eyes. He saw timelines overlapping, futures branching and collapsing. Worlds saved too early, wars fought too late. A galaxy twisted by good intentions applied at the speed of light. He opened his eyes. I won't run blind, he said, but I won't do nothing. O'Neill studied him. You have a plan? Barry nodded slowly. I don't fix the outcome. I fix the moment. I stop the probe from firing without touching anything else. Carter's eyes widened. That would require precision down to the nanosecond. Barry smiled faintly. That's kind of my brand. Teal'c inclined his head. If you must act, act with restraint. Daniel added, and remember, you're not here to be a god. You're here to be a man. Barry took a steadying breath. Then tell me where to run. Carter pulled up a projection of Earth's orbit. Here, but Barry, once you start, the Goa'uld will react. They'll adapt. They always do, Barry said. O'Neill clapped a hand on his shoulder. Just come back. Barry met his gaze. I always try. In a flash of red and gold, he was gone. The room shuddered as air rushed into the space he'd occupied. Carter watched the sensors spike, then stabilize. He's moving at relativistic speeds. No, faster. He's partially phased, Daniel whispered. He's running through time. Above the planet, unseen by human eyes, Barry Allen raced along the curvature of the atmosphere, lightning trailing behind him like a warning. He reached the probe in less than a heartbeat, fingers dancing over alien circuitry faster than thought. He didn't destroy it. He froze it, locked it in a single instant. Time wrapped around it like amber. Then he stopped. The probe fell inert, drifting harmlessly. Barry slowed. For a moment, he simply hovered in the thin edge of space, heart pounding. And then he felt it, the galaxy noticing. On the Goa'uld ship, alarms blared. Systems failed. A system lord screamed in fury as something ancient brushed against his mind, whispering a warning older than empires. Do not run where you do not belong. Barry vanished in a blur, returning to Earth just as the Goa'uld ship powered down its probe systems. He collapsed to one knee in the SGC gate room, breathing hard. O'Neill was there instantly. You good? Barry nodded weakly. Yeah, but they learned something. Carter looked at the data, pale. So did the ancients. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Carter pointed to a new signal. Faint, ancient, awakening. Whatever Barry did, she said, it echoed backward. Someone just noticed us. Teal'c's voice was grim. Then the game is changed. Barry looked up at the Stargate, feeling the speed force tug uncomfortably at his bones. Yeah, he said softly, and I think I just made it faster. The Stargate did not activate. That was the first thing Carter noticed. After Barry's return, after the probe's sudden inert drift and the Goa'uld ship's abrupt silence, the gate should have reacted. Even dormant, it usually hummed faintly, systems idling, subspace fields breathing in predictable patterns. Now it was still. Too still. Carter ran her hand across the cold metal of the control console, eyes scanning readings that refused to update properly. This isn't a power issue, she murmured. The gate is waiting. O'Neill frowned. Waiting for what? Carter didn't answer immediately. Barry sat on the ramp, legs dangling over the edge, elbows resting on his knees. He stared at his hands like they might suddenly start glowing again. His breathing had slowed, but not fully settled. The speed force pulsed around him like a restless tide, uncomfortable, irritated. "It's waiting for me," Barry said quietly. Daniel turned toward him. "You're sure?" Barry nodded. "Whatever I did out there didn't just stop the probe. I interacted with something older, something that cares very deeply about time behaving itself." Teal's eyes narrowed. "The ancients," Carter swallowed. "I'm detecting an ancient signal pattern. Not a beacon, not a message, more like a handshake." O'Neill crossed his arms. "They want to meet the guy who broke their toys." Barry let out a weak laugh. "I didn't break it. I froze it." "That's worse," Daniel said gently. "From their perspective." The gate room lights flickered once, then stabilized. A soft tone echoed through the mountain, not an alarm, but a summons. Coordinates appeared on Carter's screen without being dialed. No chevron sequence, no kawoosh. The Stargate activated silently. The event horizon formed without the explosive blast, smooth and controlled, like a door opening because it had decided to. Carter stared. "That's not possible." Barry stood slowly. "It is if you're the one who built the rules." O'Neill sighed. "I really hate it when ancient godlike beings take an interest in us." Daniel adjusted his glasses. "They usually do when we're about to do something catastrophically wrong." The Goa'uld ship in orbit powered up its weapons. Carter's console screamed. "Sir, they're charging. They're not waiting anymore." Barry looked from the gate to the readings. "They're scared." "Good," O'Neill said. "Means we did something right." "No," Barry replied softly. "It means they're desperate." The gate pulsed. Teal'c stepped closer to Barry. "If you go through, you may not return." Barry nodded. "If I don't, they might attack anyway." O'Neill looked at Carter. "Options?" She shook her head. "If the ancients want him, there's no stopping it. And if he stays, the Goa'uld will escalate." Daniel stepped forward. "Barry, whatever they're offering you, remember this. The ancients aren't benevolent. They believe in balance, not mercy." Barry smiled faintly. "Sounds familiar." He took a breath and stepped toward the gate. "Hey," O'Neill said, stopping him with a hand on his shoulder. "You don't owe us anything." Barry met his eyes. "I know, but I owe the people out there." The Goa'uld ship fired. A beam of energy lanced toward Earth. Barry vanished. The beam never hit. In less than a microsecond, Barry intercepted it, running along its surface, dispersing the energy harmlessly into the upper atmosphere. To the Goa'uld, it looked like their weapon had simply failed. To Earth, it was a brief aurora across the sky. Barry reappeared at the gate, slightly out of breath. "Okay," he said. "That's new. I can't keep doing that." O'Neill nodded once. "Then go." Barry stepped through. The world dissolved, not into light or sound, but into layers. Time peeled back like pages in a book read too fast. Barry felt the speed force stretch thin, screaming in protest as something else took over. He was moving, but not forward, sideways, diagonally, through cause and effect. He emerged into a vast chamber of white stone and impossible geometry. Platforms floated without support. Light had no source. Time felt curated. Figures stood waiting. Not human, not quite. Ancients. They did not speak aloud. Their voices arrived, fully formed in his mind. "You are not of this continuum." Barry swallowed. Yeah, I get that a lot. You have violated temporal integrity. I stopped a weapon, Barry replied. That was going to hurt people. You altered a fixed observation point. Barry frowned. You were watching? We observe. We do not interfere. Barry's jaw tightened. People are enslaved. Worlds burn. You observe. Intervention destabilizes causality. So does letting monsters rule the galaxy, Barry shot back. Silence followed. Then another presence joined the chorus. You carry a force not native to this universe. The Speed Force, Barry said. Trust me, I didn't invite it. It bleeds through realities. It erodes temporal anchors. Barry's heart sank. So I really am breaking things. Yes, he closed his eyes. Then tell me how to stop without letting everyone suffer. The ancients considered this. Time here did not pass the same way. Seconds stretched into centuries of calculation. You cannot act as you do in your universe. I figured, Barry muttered. Speed without constraint creates paradox. Barry opened his eyes. Then give me constraints. The chamber shifted. Symbols appeared. Timelines branching and collapsing. Worlds marked as fixed. Others as fluid. We will permit limited intervention. Barry stared. Permit. Within defined parameters. Daniel's voice echoed faintly in Barry's memory. You're not here to be a god. Barry nodded. Rules. I can work with rules. You will not alter fixed points. Define fixed, Barry said quickly. Events whose alteration leads to catastrophic instability. So, the really bad stuff. Yes, Barry leaned forward. And the rest? You may accelerate information, prevent unintended deaths, stabilize events already in motion. He blinked. You're letting me be support. Correct. Barry felt a strange mix of relief and frustration. I can't just fix everything. No, he exhaled. Then I'll fix what I can. The ancient's presence shifted, something like approval flickering through the mental space. But understand this, if you exceed these constraints, we will remove you from this continuum. Barry stiffened. Remove how? Permanently. He swallowed hard. No pressure. The chamber dissolved. Barry was back in the SGC gate room, stumbling slightly as gravity and time reasserted themselves. O'Neill caught him before he fell. Well? The colonel asked. Barry looked up, eyes serious. I just got probation from the people who invented time travel. Carter stared. They let you come back? For now, Barry said. With rules. The Stargate shut down on its own. Outside, the Goa old ship hesitated, weapons still charged. Barry straightened. Okay, he said. Now we do this the slow way. The Goa old ship did not fire again. That, more than anything else, unsettled the SGC. Colonel O'Neill stood in the control room with his arms crossed, watching the tactical display that showed the massive vessel hanging just outside effective weapons range. No retreat, no advance, just waiting. They're thinking, he said. I hate it when they think. Carter nodded, eyes fixed on streams of data scrolling too fast for anyone but her to follow. They've lost their temporal probe. They've seen Barry intercept a planetary-scale weapon, and now the Stargate just opened itself. That's going to scare them. Barry leaned against the railing, deliberately not moving too fast. The Speed Force tugged at him constantly, like an itch he wasn't allowed to scratch. He focused on breathing, on staying present. Scared Goa old are dangerous, Daniel said. When gods feel threatened, they don't get subtle, they get cruel. Teal'c inclined his head. They will seek to reassert dominance, not by force alone, but by spectacle. As if summoned by his words, Carter's console chimed sharply. "Sir," she said, "multiple off-world activations, Goa'uld-controlled worlds, civilian population centers." Barry straightened. "They're making examples." O'Neill swore under his breath. "Of course they are." The screens filled with images transmitted through long-range probes and allied contacts. Villages surrounded by Jaffa, staff weapons raised, Goa'uld commanders proclaiming divine judgment, executions scheduled, broadcast galaxy-wide. Daniel's face drained of color. "They're tying it to Barry, punishing anyone who might believe in him." Barry's fists clenched, lightning flickering briefly around his fingers before he forced it down. "This is my fault," he said quietly. Teal'c shook his head. "No, this is their nature." O'Neill turned to Barry. "You heard the rules. You can't just run in and fix everything." Barry swallowed. "No, but I can help." Carter looked at him sharply. "How?" Barry took a breath. "I don't stop the executions directly. I don't alter the outcome. I change the preparation." Daniel frowned. "You're talking about indirect intervention." "Exactly," Barry said. "I can get information to people, warnings, escape routes. I can disrupt logistics without being seen, make their displays fail." Carter's eyes lit with understanding. "If you interfere below the threshold of a fixed point, it stays stable," Barry finished. "People survive because they chose to run, not because a god saved them." O'Neill considered this. "You'd be the wind, not the lightning." Barry smiled faintly. "I can do subtle, sometimes." The first test came sooner than expected. A village on P3X 233. Population roughly 2,000, under Goa'uld occupation for generations. A system lord calling himself Tyr had ordered a public execution of 50 villagers accused of heresy. Broadcast scheduled to spread fear. Carter brought up the timeline. "Execution in 30 minutes local time." Barry's foot tapped involuntarily. "I can get there in seconds." O'Neill raised a finger. "You don't show yourself. You don't touch the Goa'uld. You don't change the order." Barry nodded. "I just open doors." He vanished in a whisper of displaced air. On P3X 233, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the village square. 50 villagers knelt in the dirt, hands bound, fear etched into every line of their faces. Jaffa warriors stood in a semicircle, weapons humming softly. Above them, on a raised platform, Tyr watched with bored contempt. Barry arrived between heartbeats. To the villagers, nothing happened at first. Then ropes frayed, knots loosened, shackles fell apart as if weakened by age. A child's binding snapped completely. A whisper passed through the crowd. Confusion. Hope. A gate at the edge of the square creaked open, hinges suddenly smooth. A cart rolled free of its brake, blocking a Jaffa's line of sight. A guard's staff weapon sputtered, power cell loose. Barry moved through it all like a ghost. He whispered directions. Not words, exactly. Nudges. Instincts sharpened. Paths made clear. Run now. The villagers scattered. By the time Tyr realized something was wrong, the square was chaos. Jaffa shouted. Weapons fired into empty space. The broadcast cut abruptly as a power relay failed. Barry was gone. Back in the SGC, Carter watched the feed cut out. "They escaped," she breathed. Daniel smiled. "Not because of a god, because they ran." Teal'c's voice was thoughtful. "The Jaffa will be punished for this failure." Barry's jaw tightened. "Then we do it again, and again, until the cost of terror becomes too high." O'Neill nodded slowly. "You're bleeding them without giving them a face to fight." The Goa'uld ship shifted position in orbit. They're noticing, Carter said. Pattern analysis suggests multiple disruptions across their territories. They're correlating events. Barry rubbed his temples. They will eventually. Daniel looked at him. What happens when they do? Barry met his gaze. Then they stop trying to scare people and start trying to trap me. As if on cue, Carter's console flared red. Sir, she said, we're detecting a temporal anomaly off-world. Not like Barry's, cruder, weaponized. Barry stiffened. They're building time traps. Teal'c's eyes darkened. Chronomines. They freeze moments in place. Any who enter are trapped outside of time. Barry swallowed. That's bad, Carter nodded. And they'll use civilians as bait. O'Neill exhaled slowly. Of course they will. Barry's hands trembled. He clenched them into fists, then forced them open again. I can avoid them, he said. I can feel time distortions. For now, Carter said. But the more you run, the more data they get. Barry looked at the Stargate, at the galaxy beyond. Then I don't run everywhere, he said. I pick my moments. Daniel tilted his head. You're learning restraint. Barry smiled without humor. I hate it. The Goa'uld ship powered up again, this time broadcasting a new message across the network. The image of Tyr filled the screen, fury barely contained beneath his divine facade. Let the unseen coward hear this, the System Lord roared. Run if you wish, hide behind mortals. We will burn worlds until you face us. The transmission cut. Silence fell. O'Neill looked at Barry. They want you to make a mistake, Barry nodded. Then I don't give them one. Carter hesitated. Barry, there's something else. The ancient signal. It's changing, adapting. Barry frowned. Adapting how? They're watching your choices, Carter said. Not just your speed, your judgment. Barry let out a slow breath. No pressure. Teal'c stepped closer. You do not fight alone. Barry looked at the team, at the humans who fought gods with bullets and patience. I know, he said. That's why this might actually work. Far beyond Earth, in the halls of false gods, plans were rewritten. Traps were set not in space, but in time itself. And Barry Allen stood at the center of a galaxy, learning that speed was no longer his greatest weapon. Judgment was. The first chronomine detonated on P9X 8 and 12. It did not explode. It simply stopped. Time around the device collapsed inward, freezing a section of jungle mid-motion. Leaves hung in the air, half sliced by wind that would never finish passing through them. Rain suspended itself like a curtain of glass. A Jaffa scout stepped into the field and vanished. Not destroyed, not killed, but erased from the flow of seconds. Barry felt it from 3 systems away. He staggered in the SGC gate room, grabbing the railing as the speed force recoiled violently inside him. Carter's instruments spiked so hard, alarm shrieked before she could silence them. That was a chronomine, Barry said, voice tight. They just turned time into a bear trap. Teal'c's jaw clenched. Such weapons are forbidden even among the Goa'uld. Daniel frowned. Since? When did they respect rules? Carter pulled up the data feed. The field is stable. Whatever enters it is removed from causality. No decay, no escape. O'Neill swore softly. So, if civilians wander into that, they're gone, Barry finished. Not dead. Worse, forgotten. He closed his eyes, reaching outward, feeling the distortion like a knot in reality. It tugged at him, tempting, dangerous. I can disarm it, he said, but it's a fixed temporal structure. If I rush in, you might not come back, Carter said. Barry nodded. Or I might destabilize the whole region. Daniel looked at him carefully. And that's exactly why they did this. They want me to choose, Barry said bitterly. Run in and break the rules, or let people disappear. O'Neill crossed his arms. So we don't play their game. Barry opened his eyes. We don't? No, O'Neill said. We change the board. He turned to Carter. Options. She hesitated. If we can isolate the mine, evacuate the area, prevent anyone from entering the field. That could take days, Daniel said, and the Goa'uld will deploy more. Barry paced, forcing himself not to accelerate. They're testing thresholds, seeing what makes me break. Teal'c spoke quietly. Then you must not break. Barry stopped pacing. Easy for you to say. Teal'c met his gaze. I have served gods who punished mercy. Enduring that pain was the price of eventual freedom. Barry exhaled. I hate that you're right. The second chronomine appeared 6 hours later, then a third, always near population centers, always just far enough away that intervention would require speed. Carter charted them on a galactic map. They're forming a pattern, a net. Daniel studied it. They're boxing Barry in. O'Neill looked at Barry. You feel it, don't you? Barry nodded. Like running through a maze that rearranges itself. He stared at the map, mind racing faster than his body was allowed to. Then his eyes lit with an idea. What if I don't touch the mines? He said. Carter blinked. Then how do you stop them? I don't stop them, Barry said. I make them irrelevant. Daniel frowned. Explain. Barry took a breath. Chronomines only work if someone enters the field, so we make sure no one does, permanently. Teal'c tilted his head. You propose evacuation. Mass evacuation, Barry said, but not by me. O'Neill raised an eyebrow. Care to elaborate? Barry smiled faintly. I deliver information, everywhere, instantly. Carter's eyes widened. You mean, I run messages, Barry said. Warnings, maps, timetables. I don't move people. I let them move themselves. Daniel nodded slowly. You turn the galaxy into a network. Barry's smile faded. They already have one. I just optimize it. O'Neill considered this. That keeps you under the ancient rules. And it starves the Goa'uld of leverage, Barry added. They can freeze time all they want. If no one's there, it's just empty space. Teal'c inclined his head. A wise strategy. Barry felt the speed force ease slightly, as if approving. He was gone in a controlled blur, not tearing through space, but threading it carefully. He ran gate to gate, world to world, never stopping long enough to leave a trace. He whispered warnings to resistance leaders, left data crystals where scouts would find them, adjusted radio frequencies by a fraction so messages carried farther. On P9X 8-12, villagers packed what they could and fled into the hills hours before the mine could claim another victim. On 3 other worlds, Jaffa patrols found only empty streets and abandoned fires. The Goa'uld noticed. Tyre stood in his throne room, fists clenched, watching report after report scroll past. He robs us of fear, the System Lord snarled. He turns terror into inconvenience. A subordinate bowed deeply. We can increase deployment, expand the fields. Tyre's eyes glowed. Then we will bait him. The next trap was different. A chrono field activated around a Stargate itself. Carter's console lit up. Sir, they've frozen the gate on P4X 639 mid-dial. Anyone attempting to travel will be caught in the event horizon. Daniel's face paled. That world has an active resistance cell. Barry stiffened. And now they're cut off. O'Neill looked at him. This is it. They're forcing you to touch the gate. Barry stared at the image of the frozen event horizon, rippling but unmoving. Time knotted tight around it. I can fix that, he said softly. Carter shook her head. Barry, the Stargate is a fixed point system. The ancients made sure of it. If I enter that field, Barry trailed off. You might collapse the gate, Daniel finished. Or worse. Barry clenched his jaw. If I don't, people die. Teal'c stepped forward. The Goa old exploit compassion. They assume you will choose the immediate. Barry laughed without humor. They know me too well. He closed his eyes, reaching inward, feeling the speed force churn. He remembered the ancients' warning. Fixed points, constraints. Then he remembered something else. I don't have to run through it, he said. Carter looked up. What do you mean? Barry opened his eyes. I don't enter the field. I run around it. Silence. Daniel frowned. Around time? Barry nodded. The chrono field locks a moment in place, but it still exists within a larger temporal flow. If I synchronize with the surrounding timeline and apply counterphase motion, Carter's eyes widened in horror and awe. You'd be untying it. Gently, Barry said, without touching the knot. O'Neill stared at him. Is that even possible? Barry swallowed. I don't know, but if it works, the field collapses naturally. No paradox, no violation. Teal'c placed a hand over his heart. You risk yourself for others. Barry smiled faintly. That part's not new. He vanished. The Speed Force screamed as Barry approached the frozen Stargate, skirting the edge of the chrono field, running not faster, but smarter. He matched the rhythm of local time, then shifted half a beat out of sync, circling the field like a surgeon's hand. The frozen event horizon shuddered. Then slowly, impossibly, it flowed again. The field collapsed inward, harmlessly, dissipating. The gate completed its dial. Barry collapsed on the ramp back at the SGC, gasping. Carter rushed to him. Barry, talk to me. He laughed weakly. Tell the ancients. I stayed inside the lines. The Goa'uld ship in orbit powered down several systems at once. Tyr screamed in rage as his perfect trap unraveled without spectacle. O'Neill looked at Barry, a new respect in his eyes. Kid, he said, you just taught gods a new lesson. Barry closed his eyes. Yeah, don't make me choose. The ancients noticed him after that, not as gods, not as judges, as observers. Barry felt it first as pressure, not physical, but conceptual, like standing under a thought too large to belong to any single mind. The speed force flickered uneasily around him, no longer just reacting to motion, but to attention. Carter noticed next. Her instruments registered a harmonic that shouldn't exist. Not energy, not radiation, something closer to intention. Sir, she said carefully, we're being scanned, not by Goa'uld, not by Asgard. This is different. Daniel swallowed. Ascended level different? Teal'c inclined his head. The ancients watch when the rules are tested. Barry sat on the infirmary bed, hands resting on his knees, forcing himself to remain still. I didn't break them, he said. I worked around them. Yes, Daniel said softly. That's what worries me. The air in the room shifted, not with light, not with sound, with absence, a space where something should have been. Then a voice spoke, not aloud, but directly into their awareness. You tread close to fixed moments. Barry looked up. Yeah, I know. Carter's eyes widened. You can hear them? Barry nodded. They're loud, in a quiet way. You are not of this continuum, the voice continued. Yet you shape it. Daniel felt a chill. They're not angry. No, Barry said. They're curious. The presence lingered, vast and patient. Speed unbound leads to collapse. You have learned restraint. Barry swallowed. I'm trying. There will be consequences, the voice said. Not as punishment, as balance. The presence faded. The room felt smaller afterward. O'Neill let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Well, that was comforting in a deeply unsettling way. Carter turned to Barry. They just put you on notice. Barry nodded slowly. Yeah, and I think they're right. Daniel leaned against the console. About what? Barry looked at his hands. I can't keep reacting. The Goa'uld are adapting. The Ancients are watching. The Speed Force is strained. Teal'c asked, What do you propose? Barry stood. I stop being the solution. Silence. O'Neill frowned. Care to explain that before Hammond has a heart attack? Barry paced, deliberately slow. Every time I intervene, directly, the Goa'uld escalate. Bigger traps, worse weapons, more suffering designed to bait me. Daniel nodded. They're externalizing their losses. So I stop being the visible threat, Barry said. I disappear. Carter's eyes widened. Barry, that's not... I don't leave, he clarified. I just stop being the headline. Teal'c considered this. You become shadow rather than storm. Barry smiled faintly. Exactly. Over the next week, the galaxy changed without noticing how. Barry didn't dismantle armies anymore. Instead, supply ships arrived late. Hyperdrive coordinates were subtly wrong. Jaffa patrols found themselves rerouted into empty deserts instead of villages. Slave transports developed inexplicable mechanical failures hours before launch. The Goa'uld blamed incompetence, then sabotage, then each other. On Earth, Carter noticed the pattern. He's not moving objects, she said quietly to Daniel. He's moving probabilities. Daniel nodded. Small nudges, no fixed points disturbed. O'Neill leaned back in his chair. He's weaponized inconvenience. Barry appeared in the doorway, breathless but calm. You say that like it's a bad thing. O'Neill smirked. Just don't start rearranging my coffee schedule. Barry hesitated. About that. The first system lord to break was not the strongest, but the most paranoid. Baal. He stared at his tactical display, fingers tapping in irritation as report after report contradicted the last. Convoys delayed, assassins intercepted by accidents, entire plans unraveling without a visible enemy. There is a pattern, Baal hissed, but no hand. A Jaffa knelt. My lord, some speak of a red spirit, a demon of speed. Baal smiled thinly. Good, then we will give it something it cannot outrun. He activated an ancient device recently unearthed from a buried outpost. Temporal echo amplification. The next mission SG-1 undertook felt wrong from the start. P7X-291 had gone silent. A resistance cell vanished overnight. No distress call, no wreckage, just absence. Barry stood at the gate, uneasy. This place feels hollow. Carter checked her readings. No energy signatures, no life signs. It's like time stepped around it. Daniel frowned. That's not how time works. Barry closed his eyes. It is if you copy it. They stepped through. The world was intact. Buildings standing. Fires cold but unburned. Footprints frozen mid-step. Teal'c reached down, touched the ground. They were here, Barry's heart pounded. And they still are, sort of. Carter looked at him sharply. Barry? They've been phase echoed, he said. Copied out of the timeline, like a save file. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. Baal. A shimmer passed through the air. A projection resolved into Baal's familiar smirk. Ah, there you are, Baal said. I was beginning to worry you'd lost interest. Barry stared at him. What did you do? Bale spread his hands. I removed them from consequence. They are safe, untouched, preserved. Carter snapped. You kidnapped an entire town. Bale chuckled. No, I archived them. Barry clenched his fists. Let them go. In time, Bale said. But first, I require a demonstration. The ground trembled. Another shimmer appeared. Then another. Copies. Dozens of frozen snapshots of the same people, pulled from adjacent moments. A child mid-laugh. A man mid-fall. A woman mid-scream. Daniel felt sick. He's stacking timelines. Baal's eyes gleamed. You run so fast, Flash. But can you choose which version deserves to exist? Barry's breath came shallow. He felt the Speed Force surge, furious, desperate to correct the violation. No, Barry said. I don't play this game. Baal tilted his head. You already are. The device powered up. Temporal echoes began to destabilize, overlapping, tearing at causality. Carter shouted, Barry, if those echoes collapse, the resulting paradox could wipe the system. Barry looked around, mind racing. He could fix this, easily. One burst of speed, one timeline chosen, everything else erased. It would be clean, it would be fast, it would be wrong. No, he whispered. Teal'c stepped beside him. Then what is your course? Barry took a breath. I don't choose. He ran, not forward, not backward, sideways. He dove into the Speed Force, not to change events, but to anchor them. He spread himself thin, threading his presence through every echo simultaneously, stabilizing each one just enough. His voice echoed through the frozen town, carried on 1,000 overlapping moments. You all matter, he said. Every version, every choice. The device screamed as its amplification overloaded. Baal shouted in rage. You cannot hold them all! Barry gritted his teeth. Watch me. The Speed Force flared white-hot, not with acceleration, but with endurance. One by one, the echoes collapsed, not into nothing, but back into the prime timeline. People fell, stumbled, cried out as time resumed. The town lived. Barry collapsed to his knees, barely conscious. Bale's projection flickered, fury replacing amusement. You think this victory means something? Barry looked up, exhausted but resolute. It does to them. Bale vanished. Carter rushed to Barry's side. You did it. You saved all of them. Barry shook his head weakly. No, I refuse to decide who mattered. Daniel exhaled slowly. That might be the most dangerous thing you've done yet. Teal'c placed a steadying hand on Barry's shoulder. And the most honorable. Back at the SGC, Barry lay in recovery, Speed Force barely humming. Carter studied the data. You stabilized multiple temporal echoes without collapsing them. That shouldn't be possible. Barry smiled faintly. Guess I'm learning the local rules. O'Neill leaned in the doorway. Word spreading. Barry looked at him. Good or bad? Both, O'Neill said. The Goa'uld are scared. The rebels are hopeful. And the ancients... Barry closed his eyes. They're watching. Yes, O'Neill said. But they haven't stopped you. Barry opened his eyes, determination settling in. Then I'll keep doing this. Quietly. Carefully. Daniel nodded. You're not just fighting false gods anymore. What am I fighting? Barry asked. Daniel answered softly. The idea that power gives the right to choose for others. Barry looked down at his hands again. No, he said. I'm fighting that idea in myself. The rebellion did not ignite all at once. It spread like static. Quiet disruptions at first. Missed tribute deadlines. Jaffa patrols delayed by misinformation. Entire villages relocating hours before Goa'uld landings. No speeches, no symbols. Just the slow realization that obedience was no longer the safest option. Barry watched the data streams from the SGC control room, arms folded, jaw tight. "They're adapting again," Carter said. "But not like before." Daniel leaned closer to the screen. "They're decentralizing. Smaller command cells. Less reliance on single system lords." Teal's expression darkened. "They learn from defeat." O'Neill glanced at Barry. "Which means you're officially a long-term problem." Barry didn't smile. "Good." The Speed Force hummed low and steady, no longer screaming, but never silent. Barry had learned to listen to it differently, not as an engine, as a warning system. It warned him now. He stiffened. "Something's wrong." Carter looked up. "What do you feel?" "Interference," Barry said. "Like drag, like running through water." Daniel frowned. "That's new." Teal'c's eyes narrowed. "A weapon." The first report came in seconds later. A Takra operative, mid-extraction, failed to arrive. No explosion, no energy surge, just absence. Then another, and another. Carter's console lit up with cascading alerts. "They're disappearing in transit, not dying, vanishing." Barry's pulse quickened. "They're targeting the spaces between," Daniel swallowed. "Between wormhole exits?" "No," Barry said. "Between moments." The Goa'uld had learned. They could not stop Barry from running through time, so they built places where time didn't run at all. The dead zone was discovered on P3X774, a barren world, no settlements, no strategic value, except the silence. SG-1 stepped through the gate and felt it immediately. Not cold, not heat, stillness. Sound felt muted, motion resisted. Barry took a step forward and nearly stumbled. "That's bad," he said. Carter checked her. Readings. Confusion turning to dread. "This region has zero temporal flux. It's not frozen. It's disconnected." Daniel whispered. "A temporal vacuum." Teal'c flexed his hand slowly. "I feel as if the universe has forgotten this place." Barry closed his eyes. The Speed Force barely registered here, like a heartbeat heard through walls. "They built a null," he said. "A place where I'm almost normal." O'Neill exhaled sharply. "Of course they did." A figure emerged from behind a stone outcrop. Not a system lord. An Asgard. But wrong. Thinner. Paler. Eyes dim with exhaustion. "Do not advance," the Asgard said. "Movement destabilizes the field." Carter froze. "Asgard, identify yourself." "I am Loki," the Asgard replied calmly. "Or rather, a version of him you have not yet encountered." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Oh no," Barry stared. "You're not Goa'uld." Loki inclined his head. "No, I am curious," Carter snapped. "You helped them build this." "Yes," Loki said. "In exchange for data." Teal'c growled. "You ally with enslavers." Loki's tone remained detached. "I ally with information. Your galaxy presents a unique anomaly." His gaze fixed on Barry. "You." Barry felt a chill. "I get that a lot." "The Speed Force does not belong here," Loki continued. "It destabilizes evolutionary paths, disrupts long-term outcomes." Daniel stepped forward. "So you help create a place that erases people from time?" Loki tilted his head. "No, a place that prevents alteration." Barry shook his head. "You're scared of me." Loki did not deny it. "You are uncontrolled potential." Barry's voice hardened. "I've been careful." "Yes," Loki said. "Recently." The dead zone pulsed faintly, a low-frequency vibration that made Barry's teeth ache. Carter whispered, "Barry, this field is expanding." Loki nodded. "It will eventually encompass nearby hyperspace lanes." Stargates, perhaps entire systems. O'Neill snapped. You're threatening to quarantine half the galaxy. Loki's eyes met his. To preserve it. Barry took a slow step forward, resistance pressing against him. You're not preserving anything, you're freezing it. Correct, Loki said. Evolution requires stability. Barry laughed softly. No, it requires choice. The Speed Force flickered, strained but present. Barry planted his feet. You built this to stop me, but you miscalculated. Loki frowned slightly. Explain. I don't need speed to change things, Barry said. I just need people. He tapped his comm. Carter, Daniel, Teals, get everyone out, now. Carter hesitated. Barry, please, he said. Trust me. They retreated through the gate as the dead zone hummed louder. Loki watched Barry with curiosity. You remain, Barry nodded. Someone has to. You will be isolated, Loki warned. Cut off from your allies. Barry smiled faintly. Story of my life. Loki activated the field's core. The gate winked out. Silence fell. The Speed Force dimmed to a whisper. Barry stood alone with Loki in a universe that barely acknowledged motion. This is where you end, Loki said. Not with death, with irrelevance. Barry closed his eyes. He did not run. He remembered. Faces, voices, choices made slowly and deliberately. The people he'd saved by not intervening. The lives that continued because he'd stepped back. He reached inward, not for speed, but for connection. The Speed Force responded, differently, not as motion, as memory. Time here was thin, but not empty. Barry moved, not faster, but deeper. He reached the field's anchor and touched it, not with force, with resonance. The dead zone shuddered. Loki's eyes widened. Impossible, Barry breathed hard. You built this to block change, but you forgot something. What? Loki demanded. Change isn't speed, Barry said. It's persistence. The field began to unravel, not collapsing, but loosening, rejoining the surrounding timeline like a scar healing. Loki staggered back. You're rewriting the null. No, Barry corrected. I'm reconnecting it. The gate reactivated in a flash of light. SG-1 rushed through as the dead zone dissipated. Carter stared at the readings in disbelief. He didn't break it, Daniel whispered. He taught it how to exist again. Loki looked at Barry, something like respect flickering in his eyes. You are dangerous. Barry met his gaze. Good, so are you. Maybe we can stop pretending that makes us enemies. Loki considered this, then vanished in a beam of Asgard light. The field collapsed completely. Time resumed its natural flow. Barry sagged, nearly falling as Teal'c caught him. You endure even when stripped of power, Teal'c said. That is true strength. Barry managed a tired smile. Remind me of that next time. Back at the SGC, the implications settled in. Carter stared at the data. If the Goa'uld and the Asgard can build temporal nulls, Daniel finished quietly, then the galaxy is becoming a chessboard made of time. O'Neill looked at Barry. And you're the only piece that doesn't move the way they expect. Barry rubbed his temples. Which means they're going to stop playing nice. The Speed Force pulsed faintly, uneasy. Far across the galaxy, in a chamber older than any empire, the ancients watched the dead zones collapse. He adapts, one observed. Yes, another replied, and learns restraint. A dangerous combination, a third said. They did not intervene, yet. The warning came without alarms, no klaxons, no flashing lights, just a sudden silence in the SGC control room that felt too deliberate to be natural. Barry felt it before anyone spoke. The Speed Force didn't recoil. It didn't surge. It simply went still, like a held breath. He straightened slowly. They've stopped reacting. O'Neill looked up from the console. That's bad, right? Carter frowned at her screens. All known Goa'uld movements just halted. No ship repositioning. No gate activity. It's like someone hit pause. Daniel's expression darkened. Empires don't pause. They plan. Teal'c crossed his arms. When system lords cease their infighting, it signals preparation for something severe. Barry swallowed. They've decided I'm not a variable anymore. O'Neill grimaced. They think they've accounted for you. Yes, Barry said quietly, which means whatever they're about to do doesn't involve speed. The first sign of what they'd chosen came from a place Barry couldn't outrun. Earth. Carter's console chimed. She froze. Sir, we have an incoming transmission, originating inside the solar system. O'Neill's posture hardened instantly. That's not possible. The image resolved on the screen. A single Goa'uld vessel hung just beyond lunar orbit. No shields raised, no weapons charging. And standing in the center of the projection chamber aboard the ship was a human figure. Alive. Unarmed. Daniel's breath caught. That's Dr. Langford. Carter stared in horror. He was declared dead years ago. Teal'c's eyes burned. The Goa'uld preserve useful prisoners. The man looked older, tired, but unmistakably human. He raised his head and spoke, his voice layered with a faint Goa'uld resonance that made Barry's skin crawl. We request parley. O'Neill barked a humorless laugh. Of course you do. The transmission shifted. The human figure stepped aside, and the system lord stepped forward. Not Baal, not Tyr, not Freya. This one wore no stolen myth. His voice was calm, precise. I am called Amunet, he said, and we have reached a conclusion. Barry felt the speed force twitch uneasily. Amunet continued. Your speed makes conquest inefficient. Your restraint makes suppression difficult. Therefore, we will no longer fight you. Daniel's stomach sank. That's worse. Amunet's eyes fixed on the camera. We will demonstrate. The image shifted. Another world. A human settlement. Peaceful, unarmed. And then, without warning, the gate behind them activated. Not with a wormhole, with light. The village vanished. No explosion, no screams, just absence. Carter's hands shook. They gated the planet, Teal'c spoke in disbelief. They removed the entire world, Amunet nodded. We have repurposed an ancient transport array. We no longer enslave populations. Barry's heart pounded. Then where did they go? Amunet's smile was cold. They are safe, preserved, beyond your reach, Daniel whispered. Stasis worlds. Amunet inclined his head. You understand. Barry stepped forward. You're imprisoning entire civilizations. No, Amunet corrected. We are saving them. From you. The Speed Force surged, furious. You think this is mercy? Barry snapped. Amunet's tone remained even. It is efficiency. No suffering. No rebellion. No need for gods. O'Neill slammed a fist on the console. You don't get to call that saving. Amunet looked almost bored. You forced our hand. Your presence destabilized the cycle of control. So we removed the cycle. Barry's voice dropped. And if I intervene? Amunet met his gaze. Then we will remove more. Silence fell in the control room. Carter whispered, They're using you as leverage. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, they're neutralizing hope. Teal'c's fists clenched. This is annihilation by stillness. Barry stared at the frozen image of the vanished world. He could fix this. He could run. He could breach the stasis arrays. He could shatter them. But the Speed Force screamed warnings now, louder than ever. Every path he saw ended the same way. More worlds removed, more lives suspended. The Goa'uld had found a weapon Speed couldn't counter. Patience. Amonet's image flickered. We will give you time to consider. 30 of your hours. If you remain inactive, no further worlds will be taken. And if I don't? Barry asked. Amonet's smile widened slightly. Then we accelerate. The transmission cut. O'Neill turned to Barry. Okay, I'm officially out of sarcastic comments. Carter looked stricken. Barry, if you move against them, they'll just keep doing this. Daniel rubbed his face. They've turned non-violence into a weapon. Teal'c looked at Barry with steady intensity. What do you see? Barry closed his eyes. He saw every path he'd learned not to take. And then, something else. I see a trap, he said slowly. But not for me. Carter looked up. Explain. They think I'm the center, Barry said. That everything depends on my action. Daniel nodded cautiously. That's been true so far. Barry opened his eyes. Then we change that. O'Neill frowned. Care to elaborate before Earth becomes a museum exhibit? Barry took a breath. They're removing worlds because they think I'll react, so I don't. Carter stared. Barry, I know, he said. It sounds insane. Teal'c spoke quietly. Sometimes the bravest action is endurance. Barry nodded. But not passive endurance. Collective. Daniel's eyes widened. You want to make their threat meaningless. Barry looked at him. I want to make it obsolete. Over the next 24 hours, Barry did nothing. At least, nothing visible. He didn't run. He didn't intervene. He didn't even leave the base. The Goa'uld waited. And across the galaxy, something unprecedented happened. Worlds went silent on purpose. Resistance cells shut down operations. Villages evacuated into deep wilderness. Stargates were buried, sealed, dismantled. The network Barry had quietly built over weeks activated itself. Warnings spread without him carrying them. People moved because they had learned to move. The second deadline passed. Amonet ordered another demonstration. The gate activated on an empty world. Nothing happened. Confusion rippled through Goa'uld command channels. They targeted another. Empty. A third. Vacant. Carter stared at the reports in disbelief. They have no one left to remove, Daniel whispered. He taught the galaxy to stop standing still. Teal'c nodded. The chains were habit as much as force. Amonet appeared again, his composure cracking for the first time. You orchestrated this, he hissed. Barry stepped into view, calm, still. No, Barry said. I let it happen, Amonet sneered. You condemned them to lives of fear. Barry shook his head. No, I showed them they could choose. Amonet's eyes burned. Then we will remove you. Barry smiled faintly. That's the problem. He leaned closer to the camera. You already tried. The Speed Force pulsed, not fast, but steady. Amonet felt it. For the first time, uncertainty crept into a system lord's voice. You are no longer the center, Barry nodded. Exactly. The transmission cut. O'Neill let out a long breath. Well, that was terrifying. Carter looked at Barry with something like awe. You didn't outrun them, Daniel smiled softly. You outgrew them. Barry sank into a chair, exhausted. I just stopped being special. Teal'c placed a hand on his shoulder. You became something far more dangerous to tyrants. Barry looked up. What's that? Teal'c answered simply. Proof that they are unnecessary. Far away, in chambers of light and thought, the ancients watched again. This path was not foreseen, one said. another replied. He removes himself from prophecy. A risk, a third noted. Yes, the first agreed, but also hope. Barry closed his eyes as the Speed Force settled into a calm, enduring rhythm. The galaxy had changed again, not because he ran, but because he stopped. The Goa'uld response came 3 days later, not with ships, not with weapons, with silence. Entire systems went dark at once. Stargates powered down, hyperlanes cleared. No broadcasts, no patrols, no threats. The galaxy felt like it was holding its breath. Barry stood in the SGC gate room, arms folded, staring at the inert ring. The Speed Force hummed faintly, uneasy, like it knew this quiet wasn't peace. "They're withdrawing," Carter said, scanning the readouts. "Every known System Lord territory. They're pulling back to core worlds." Daniel frowned. "That's not retreat. That's consolidation." Teal'c nodded. "When the Goa'uld cease displays of power, it is because they prepare to rule through absence." O'Neill muttered. "Great, now they're doing minimalist tyranny." Barry exhaled slowly. "They've realized brute force doesn't work anymore, not against the network." Carter looked at him. "Then what's their move?" Barry didn't answer right away. He was listening, not to instruments, to the Speed Force. It wasn't screaming. It wasn't pulling him toward danger. It was whispering, warning. "They're going after something I can't protect by stepping back," he said finally. Daniel's expression tightened. "What?" Barry met his eyes. "The idea of time itself. The first anomaly appeared near a black hole system with no human presence. Ancient ruins detected decades ago, deemed inert. Now they were active." Carter's fingers flew across the console. "Energy spike registering as temporal lattice formation. They're building something massive." Daniel's voice was quiet. "A reset." Teal'c stiffened. "Explain." Barry closed his eyes. "They're not trying to beat me anymore. They're trying to erase the conditions that made me possible." O'Neill stared. "You mean they're going to lock the timeline?" Barry said. "Hard-coded. No deviations, no anomalies, no Speed Force." Carter swallowed. "A universal fixed point," Daniel whispered. "The ancients warned against that." "Yes," Barry said, "because it ends free will." The realization settled heavily over the room. O'Neill broke the silence. "Okay, so how do we stop a galaxy-sized undo button?" Barry shook his head. "We don't." Carter spun toward him. "Barry, we can't," he repeated. "Not directly. If I run at it, they accelerate the lock. If we attack it, they finish it faster." Daniel rubbed his temples. "So, what's the play?" Barry looked at the gate. "We let them build it." Stunned silence. Teal'c spoke first. "That is unacceptable." "I know," Barry said, "but hear me out." He paced slowly, deliberately not accelerating. "They're using ancient architecture. That means rules, safeguards, constraints." Carter nodded reluctantly. "Ancient systems always had fail conditions." "Exactly," Barry said. "And one of those conditions is choice." Daniel's eyes widened. The ancients never fully removed agency. Even their worst mistakes left exits. Barry smiled faintly. "Because they were afraid of becoming gods." O'Neill crossed his arms. "So you're saying the Goa'uld are about to trip over someone else's conscience?" Barry nodded. "And we're going to help." The plan was simple, which meant it was terrifying. SG-1 would do nothing to interfere with construction. No sabotage, no raids, no warnings. Instead, they would spread information. Not orders, not commands. Truth. Daniel would transmit cultural archives. Records of worlds that thrived without gods. evidence of societies that chose their own paths once free. Teal'c would contact Jaffa networks, not to rally them, but to inform them, to tell them what was being built and what it meant. Carter would leak technical data, not schematics, consequences, what a locked timeline would do to innovation, adaptation, survival. Barry would remain visible, present, still, a reminder. The Goa'uld noticed the lack of resistance and misread it as fear. Construction accelerated. The device grew, orbiting the black hole like a crown of light and equations, drawing on gravity, subspace, and stolen ancient knowledge. They called it the eternal moment. When activated, it would anchor the present state of the galaxy indefinitely. No rebellions, no anomalies, no future different from now. Barry felt it like a weight pressing against every second. "You okay?" O'Neill asked quietly as Barry stood in the observation deck, watching the distant construction feed. Barry nodded. "It's getting harder to move," Daniel swallowed. "Because of the lock?" "Because the universe is being told to stop imagining," Barry said. The first cracks appeared where no one expected, among the Goa'uld themselves. Minor system lords began to defect, not out of morality, but fear. A locked timeline meant no ambition, no advancement, no ascension to greater power. The Goa'uld thrived on change, even violent change. A future frozen forever terrified them. Carter stared at intercepted communications. "They're arguing, fighting. Some are sabotaging construction." Teal'c nodded. "They have built their empire on the promise that tomorrow can be seized." Barry smiled sadly. "And now tomorrow's canceled." Aminet appeared again, his composure strained. "You have poisoned the process," he accused. Barry met his gaze calmly. "No, I told the truth." "You manipulated them." Barry shook his head. "I trusted them," Aminet hissed. "The eternal moment will bring peace." "It will bring stagnation," Barry replied. "And you know it." Aminet's eyes flickered. "We will rule forever." Barry's voice was soft. "Forever without becoming more is just a slower kind of death." The final activation countdown began anyway. 24 hours. The ancients watched in silence. The speed force trembled, stretched thin, as if bracing for impact. Carter approached Barry quietly. "If this activates—" "I know," Barry said. "I'll be gone. Or worse, I'll be normal." Daniel joined them. "And if there's no exit?" Barry smiled faintly. "Then at least I didn't become what I was fighting." Teal'c placed a hand on Barry's shoulder. "You face this with honor." The final hour arrived. The eternal moment powered up, drawing in energy from the black hole, stabilizing it, freezing its chaotic nature into perfect symmetry. Time across nearby systems began to smooth. Randomness faded, probability narrowed. Barry felt it closing around him like a vice. His movement slowed, not physically, existentially. Then something unexpected happened. A failsafe activated, not from the Goa'uld, from the device itself. An ancient protocol triggered by a simple condition: widespread informed dissent. The system detected that sentient beings understood the consequences and rejected them willingly. The eternal moment hesitated. Aminet screamed in fury as control slipped. "No," he shouted. "Override it." The device did not respond. Barry felt the pressure ease slightly. Daniel stared at the readings. "The system requires universal consent." Carter's eyes widened. "The ancients built tyranny proofing into time." Teal'c allowed himself a rare smile. "Wisdom." The eternal moment collapsed inward, not exploding, but dissolving into harmless light. Time breathed again, Across the galaxy, randomness returned. So did hope. Aminet's transmission cut off mid-scream. The Speed Force surged back into Barry, not violently, but warmly. He sagged against the railing, exhausted. O'Neill let out a breath. I hate to say it, but I think we just won without firing a shot. Barry shook his head. No, we just avoided losing ourselves. Carter looked at him. You didn't save the galaxy by being the fastest man alive. Daniel smiled. You saved it by being willing to let go. Barry closed his eyes. The Speed Force settled into a steady, sustainable rhythm. Far beyond mortal perception, the ancients finally spoke. Balance restored, one said. Anomaly contained, another agreed. But not removed, a third noted. No, the first replied. He has become integrated. Barry opened his eyes, feeling something new. Not urgency, not pressure, belonging. The galaxy did not celebrate. There were no ceremonies, no declarations of victory, no single moment anyone could point to and say, this is when everything changed. Instead, things simply kept going, but differently. Barry noticed it first in the quiet reports. Worlds that had gone dark reappeared on long-range scans. Stargates cautiously reactivated. Trade routes reopened, not because anyone commanded it, but because people decided it was safe enough to try. Hope didn't explode outward. It seeped back in. Barry stood alone in the SGC gate room late at night, the lights dimmed to standby. The Stargate sat dormant, massive and ancient, a reminder that movement had always come with cost. The Speed Force was still there, but it felt anchored, not pulling him forward, not urging him to fix anything, just present. O'Neill's voice echoed from the doorway. You're gonna wear a hole in the floor if you keep standing there. Barry smiled faintly. Old habit. O'Neill stepped beside him, hands in his pockets. Galaxy seems quieter. Barry nodded. It's figuring itself out again. They stood in silence for a moment. Then O'Neill spoke carefully. You know this doesn't mean the Goa'uld are done. I know, Barry said, but they can't pretend to be inevitable anymore. That alone is going to drive them nuts, O'Neill replied, which, I'll admit, I enjoy. Barry glanced at him. You okay? O'Neill snorted. Kid, I just watched a guy who can outrun light decide not to. I'm still processing. They shared a brief smile. Carter found Barry the next morning in the lab, standing still while instruments hummed around him. Your readings have stabilized, she said. Whatever changed, it stuck. Barry looked at her. Am I still a problem? She considered that. You're a variable, but now you're a predictable one. Barry chuckled. That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me. Daniel joined them, carrying a stack of reports. The Jaffa networks are changing, not uniting, exactly, but talking, asking questions. Teal'c entered quietly behind him. Many no longer wear their symbols. They do not yet know what replaces them. Barry turned to him. Does that scare you? Teal'c shook his head. No, it is familiar. Freedom is disorienting. Barry nodded. Yeah, tell me about it. The consequences of the eternal moment's failure rippled outward. System lords who had backed the project lost credibility. Others fractured their alliances. Some vanished entirely, retreating deeper into space, unwilling to rule without certainty. A few tried to reassert control the old way. Those attempts failed faster than anyone expected, not because Barry intervened, because people moved. On 3 worlds, villages evacuated before fleets arrived. On another, Jaffa units refused orders and walked away. On a 5th, A Goa'uld found himself alone on a throne with no one left to fear him. Barry watched these reports with a strange mix of pride and restraint. "This is the part where I would normally step in," he admitted quietly. Daniel looked at him. And now I don't have to," Barry said. "That's new." The Speed Force agreed. It no longer surged at every injustice. It responded only when something truly threatened to fracture reality itself. Speed, finally, had limits. Weeks passed, then months. Barry stayed, not as a weapon, not as a miracle, as support. He trained SG teams in rapid evacuation logistics, helped Carter design early warning systems that didn't rely on him, assisted Daniel in mapping cultural fault lines where intervention would do more harm than good. Sometimes he ran, but only when asked, and only when necessary. The first time he refused to intervene, it almost broke him. A minor Goa'uld attempted to reclaim a liberated world. The locals asked for help. Barry listened, then shook his head. "I can't fix this for you," he said gently, "but I can help you prepare." They did, and they won. Not cleanly, not easily, but on their own terms. That night, Barry sat alone, hands shaking slightly. Teal'c joined him without a word. "I wanted to run," Barry admitted. "So badly," Teal'c nodded. "And you did not." Barry looked at him. "How do you live with that?" Teal'c answered, after a long pause. "By remembering that victory earned by others endures longer than victory given." Barry let that settle. The ancients did not appear again, but Barry felt them sometimes, not watching, not judging, acknowledging. He had not broken their rules. He had understood them. The Speed Force adapted. It no longer treated the Stargate universe as an error. It treated it as a boundary, one that required care. Carter confirmed it months later. "Your connection is localized now. You can still access the Speed Force, but it won't let you destabilize large-scale causality." Barry smiled. "Built-in guardrails," Daniel added. "Like the ancients intended." O'Neill clapped Barry on the shoulder. "Congratulations, you're officially the least dangerous godlike entity we've ever hosted." Barry laughed. "I'll take that." The question he'd been avoiding finally came. Hammond asked it gently, over coffee in his office. "You could try to go home again," the generals said. "We could attempt another dimensional alignment." Barry considered it. The Speed Force stirred, curious but not urgent. "I could," Barry said, "but I don't think I should. Not yet." Hammond nodded. "You found something here." Barry looked out the window at the Colorado sky. "I spent my whole life fixing things too fast to understand them. Here, I had to slow down." "You're welcome to stay," Hammond said. "As long as you want." Barry smiled. "Thank you, sir." Later that night, Barry stood at the gate again, not because it was calling him, because it was quiet. He placed a hand on the cool metal. "I don't belong here," he said softly, "but I choose to stay." The Speed Force pulsed once. Approval. Across the galaxy, stories spread. Not of a red blur, not of a man who outran gods, but of a strange visitor who showed up, helped people realize they didn't need saving, and then stepped back. A hero who taught a galaxy how to move on its own. Barry Allen remained the fastest man alive. But in this universe, what mattered most was that he finally learned when not to run. The first sign that Barry's presence had truly altered the balance did not come from the Goa'uld. It came from Earth. A report crossed Carter's desk that made her stop mid-sentence. She read it twice, then a third time. "Sir," she said slowly, "we have a problem, or maybe an opportunity." O'Neill looked up from his paperwork. "Those are usually the same thing around here." Carter turned the monitor so the others could see. Deep space telemetry just detected an anomaly near the edge of the local group. Not Goa'uld, not Asgard, not ancient. Barry felt the Speed Force stir, cautious but attentive. That's not good, Daniel leaned closer. Define anomaly. Carter hesitated. A region where probability behaves differently. Events resolve toward equilibrium faster than they should, Barry's brow furrowed. That's artificial. Teal'c folded his arms. Someone is imposing order, Barry swallowed. Or something is. The anomaly had a shape, not spherical, not expanding like a weapon. It was converging, as if the universe itself was being gently persuaded to make up its mind. They sent probes. The probes did not vanish. They returned intact, but changed. Carter replayed the data. No damage, no energy residue, but their internal clocks are synchronized perfectly, down to the quantum level. Daniel whispered, "Nothing does that naturally." Barry felt a chill. "That's not time control, that's time agreement." O'Neill leaned back. "I don't like anything that convinces reality instead of forcing it." The anomaly moved again, closer. Barry stared at the star map, jaw tight. It's responding to instability, big swings, wars, power vacuums. Teal'c nodded. "It is drawn to chaos." "No," Barry said quietly. "It's drawn to correction." The ancients noticed. This time, they did not speak in riddles. The air in the briefing room shimmered, and a single presence manifested. Not ascended light, not illusion, a projection anchored in space-time. "We did not foresee this outcome," the ancient said. Daniel swallowed. "You didn't foresee a lot lately." The ancient regarded him calmly. "True." Barry stepped forward. "What is it?" "A system," the ancient replied. "A consequence. When enough anomalies coexist without collapse, the universe develops compensatory structures." Carter frowned. "Like an immune response." "Yes," the ancient said. "A stabilizer." Barry's stomach sank. "And it doesn't care who it hurts." "No," the ancient said. "Only that balance is restored." O'Neill rubbed his face. "So, let me get this straight. We stopped the gods. We avoided freezing time. And now the universe itself is stepping in?" "Yes," the ancient confirmed. Barry exhaled slowly. "Because I stayed." The ancient's gaze fixed on him. "Because you adapted instead of departing." Daniel looked between them. "Is that bad?" The ancient paused. "It is unprecedented." The stabilizer acted subtly at first. Conflicts de-escalated abruptly. Wars stalled without explanation. Leaders lost conviction mid-speech. Revolutions dissolved into negotiations that no one remembered initiating. At first, it looked like peace. Then the side effects emerged. Innovation slowed. Art stagnated. Cultures stopped changing. Barry watched a transmission from a world he'd once helped evacuate. The people were safe, fed, calm, and hollow. "They're not choosing peace," Barry said softly. "It's being chosen for them." Carter nodded. "Probability curves are flattening. The universe is smoothing out." Teal'c's voice was low. "This is another form of control." Daniel clenched his jaw. "And unlike the Goa'uld, you can't shoot it." Barry closed his eyes, listening to the Speed Force. It felt conflicted, like two principles in argument. "The stabilizer is using the same logic I used," Barry realized. "Reduce extremes, avoid catastrophic choices." O'Neill looked at him sharply. "But without conscience," Barry nodded. "Exactly." The ancient spoke again. "This structure cannot be dismantled by force. It exists because the universe believes it is necessary." Barry opened his eyes. "Then we have to convince it otherwise." Silence. Carter blinked. You want to argue with reality. Barry gave a tired smile. I've done worse. The plan was reckless. It involved no speed, no sabotage, no weapons. Barry would enter the stabilizer's influence zone and do the one thing it was designed to prevent. Make a choice, a real one with risk, one with consequences. If you do this, the Ancient warned, you may destabilize yourself completely. Barry nodded. That's kind of the point. O'Neill stepped closer. You don't have to do this. Barry met his gaze. I do, because this thing exists because of me, not my power, my restraint. Daniel's voice wavered. Barry, what if it erases you? Barry smiled gently. Then at least the universe remembers that someone chose. He stepped through the Stargate. The stabilizer's region felt like walking into consensus. Every step was gently corrected. Every thought nudged towards safety. Barry stood at the center, heart pounding. The universe waited. He felt the speed force, strain, uncertain. Okay, Barry whispered. Here's my argument. He chose something wrong. He accelerated, just enough to introduce uncertainty. Not to save anyone, not to prevent disaster, just to act. The stabilizer reacted instantly, trying to dampen the deviation. Barry pushed back, not with speed, but with intent. Choice, risk, meaning. The region trembled. Probability spiked wildly for the first time. The universe reevaluated. The stabilizer did not collapse. It hesitated. Then slowly, impossibly, it loosened. Not gone, recalibrated. Balance no longer meant stillness. It meant allowance. Barry collapsed to his knees as the pressure lifted. The Stargate activated behind him. He fell through it, landing hard on the ramp at the SGC. Carter rushed forward. Barry, are you... He laughed weakly. I think... The universe blinked. The ancient presence faded, a final thought lingering. Balance is not the absence of chaos, it said. It is the permission for choice. The anomaly stabilized, no longer smoothing reality flat, but reinforcing its ability to recover. Cultures resumed change. Art returned. Risk returned. So did responsibility. Barry lay back, staring at the ceiling. O'Neill shook his head slowly. You just taught reality a philosophy lesson. Barry smiled faintly. It needed one. The speed force settled again, quieter than ever, but firm. Not urging him to run, trusting him not to. Recovery took longer this time, not physically. Barry's body healed quickly, as it always did. Bruises faded, muscles steadied, heart rate normalized. What took time was something else. Barry sat in the infirmary, staring at the wall long after the monitors said he was fine. The speed force was still there, but quieter than it had ever been. Not weakened, not diminished, balanced. Carter noticed it first. Your neural activity is different, she said carefully, adjusting a sensor. Not slower, just less reactive. Barry smiled faintly. Guess the universe taught me to breathe. Daniel leaned against the doorway. You didn't just push back against the stabilizer. You changed the rules it was operating under. Barry shrugged. I reminded it that fixing everything breaks things too. Teal'c stood nearby, silent as always, watching Barry with the measured respect he reserved for warriors who had survived something no one else fully understood. The galaxy will feel this, Teal'c said. Not immediately, but inevitably. Barry nodded. That's okay. Change shouldn't be instant. Outside the infirmary, the SGC was adjusting. New protocols were written, not for Barry's power, but for its absence. Systems that had grown dependent on his presence were redesigned to function without him. Evacuation timelines assumed no speedster intervention. Intelligence gathering slowed to human limits. It was uncomfortable, necessary. O'Neill summed it up best during a briefing. If the fastest guy in the universe is part of your plan sucks. Barry laughed from his seat. Hey, you know I'm right, O'Neill said. And so do you. Barry did. The galaxy tested the new equilibrium almost immediately. A Goa'uld remnant attempted to seize a lightly defended trade world. No chrono traps, no stasis weapons, just ships and fear and old habits. The locals didn't call for Barry, they called for each other. Jaffa defectors joined human militias. Takra intelligence arrived early. Supplies were hidden. Gates were buried. By the time SG-1 arrived, the battle was already over. Daniel stared at the after-action reports in disbelief. They didn't just survive, they coordinated. Carter nodded. Without us. Barry watched the footage quietly. Pride swelled. So did something else. Relief. That's what winning looks like, he said softly. The ancients did not appear again, but their absence felt deliberate now. They were no longer monitoring an anomaly. They were watching a student surpass the need for supervision. The Speed Force responded in kind. Barry discovered new limits. He could still run faster than thought, but he could no longer tear across timelines indiscriminately. The Speed Force resisted those impulses now, gently but firmly, like a hand on his shoulder, not forbidding, guiding. Carter confirmed it weeks later. Your connection now prioritizes local causality. You can move fast, but you can't override outcomes on a macro scale. Barry smiled. That's good. I was bad at knowing where to stop. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Past tense? Barry laughed quietly. I'm working on it. The question he'd been avoiding finally came from the person he least expected. Teal'c. They stood together in the observation deck, watching the stars drift slowly past as Earth rotated. You have chosen to remain, Teal'c said, yet you do not belong to this universe. Barry nodded. I know. Does this trouble you? Barry thought about it, about Central City, about friends who would never know where he went, about a life paused without explanation. Then he thought about the galaxy he'd helped slow down enough to breathe. It does, Barry admitted, but not as much as leaving would. Teal'c inclined his head. Then you have found purpose beyond origin. Barry smiled. Guess so. Weeks turned into months. The Goa'uld adapted again, but weaker this time. Fragmented, paranoid. Without the illusion of inevitability, their power eroded faster than anyone had predicted. Some attempted to negotiate. Others fled. A few tried to ascend prematurely and failed spectacularly. Barry did not intervene. He watched, learned, let the galaxy earn its future. One night, long after most of the base had gone quiet, Barry stood before the Stargate once more. Not because it called to him, but because he remembered how easily it could take him away. He placed a hand on the cold metal. I could go, he said softly. Try again, find my way back. The Speed Force stirred, uncertain but receptive. The gate remained still. Barry closed his eyes. Then he stepped back. Not yet, he said. And for the first time, there was no regret in the words. The galaxy moved on, not faster, better. The message arrived without priority codes. No alarms, no red lights, no urgency markers, which is why it terrified Carter more than anything she had seen in months. She stared at the signal on her screen, lips pressed into a thin line. Sir, this didn't come through the Stargate network. O'Neill looked up sharply. Then how did it get here? Carter hesitated. It didn't travel. It was already here. Barry felt the Speed Force stir uneasily, not in warning, but in recognition. "That's not a transmission," he said. "That's a synchronization." Daniel stepped closer. "From who?" Carter swallowed. "From everywhere." The signal resolved into a pattern that wasn't data so much as alignment. A subtle shift in background radiation. A galaxy-wide agreement occurring beneath perception. Teal's eyes narrowed. "The stabilizer," Barry nodded slowly. "What's left of it?" The message wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. Carter's instruments translated it as best they could, though language barely applied. Equilibrium requires continuity. Continuity requires a steward. O'Neill stared at the words. "Yeah, that's a hard no from me." Barry didn't laugh. "They're asking for help," he said quietly. Daniel looked at him. "From you." Barry nodded. "Not as a ruler, not as a god, as a reference point." Teal'c spoke carefully. "Explain." Barry closed his eyes, listening. The universe corrected itself by learning to allow choice again. But now it wants reinforcement, someone who understands restraint and consequence. O'Neill crossed his arms. "Let me guess, volunteer position, no vacation time." Barry smiled faintly. "Sounds about right." Carter shook her head. "Barry, that's not a job. That's becoming part of the system." "I know," Barry said. Daniel's voice was low. "You'd stop being human." Barry opened his eyes. "I'd stop being only human." Silence fell. The Speed Force pulsed, cautious but steady. "I wouldn't be in charge," Barry continued. "I wouldn't decide outcomes. I'd just exist as a reminder that choice matters." O'Neill stared at him. "Kid, you finally learned how not to play God, and now the universe wants to promote you." Barry laughed quietly. "Yeah, irony's not subtle." Teal'c studied Barry for a long moment. "Would this end your time among us?" Barry hesitated. "Eventually, I think I'd fade, become less immediate." Carter's eyes shone. "You'd be alone," Barry shook his head. "I don't think so, not really." The signal intensified slightly, patient but persistent. Daniel stepped forward. "You don't have to answer now." Barry nodded. "I know." Days passed. The galaxy didn't stop. Trade resumed. Conflicts flared and cooled. Worlds argued, failed, rebuilt. Life continued. Barry walked the base more slowly than ever before, talked with technicians, shared coffee with O'Neill, debated philosophy with Daniel late into the night. Listened to Teal speak of freedom without destiny. Every moment mattered more because it might end. Carter found him one evening standing alone in the gate room. "You're thinking about leaving," she said softly. Barry smiled. "I'm thinking about staying in a different way," she swallowed. "Is it fair for the universe to ask this of you?" Barry considered that. "Is it fair that I can run faster than time?" Carter looked away. "No." "Then fairness isn't really the metric," Barry said gently. "The choice came sooner than expected. A localized temporal collapse formed near an uninhabited system. Not dangerous yet, but growing. The remnants of the stabilizer were reacting without guidance. Barry felt it pulling at him, not demanding, waiting. He stood before the Stargate one last time. SG-1 stood with him. O'Neill cleared his throat. "I'm not good at speeches, so I'll just say this. You did good here. Whatever you do next, don't forget that." Barry smiled. "Hard to forget you, sir." Daniel stepped forward. "You taught a galaxy how to grow up. That matters." Teal'c placed his fist over his heart. "You chose restraint over glory. That is the path of the truly strong." Carter's voice trembled. "If you do this, will we ever see you again?" Barry met her eyes. Maybe not like this, but I'll be around in the quiet moments when time slows just enough. She nodded, tears falling freely now. Then, thank you. Barry turned toward the anomaly forming on the far side of the gate. The speed force rose to meet him, not rushing, not pulling, inviting. He took a breath. I'm not here to rule, he said softly, to the universe itself. I'm here to remember. He stepped forward, light wrapped around him, not blinding, but warm, familiar, new. Barry Allen did not disappear. He diffused, across timelines, across probabilities, across moments where choice wavered, not to decide, to allow. The Stargate powered down gently. Silence filled the room. O'Neill exhaled slowly. Well, Daniel wiped his eyes. He became exactly what he needed to be. Teal'c nodded. A guardian who does not command. Carter stared at the dormant gate, sensors quiet. Somewhere, impossibly close and impossibly far, the speed force settled into a new harmony. And the universe learned something vital. Speed does not define progress. Choice does. Time did not notice Barry Allen was gone. Not at first. Clocks ticked, stars burned, stargates dialed and disconnected as they always had. The galaxy did not pause to acknowledge a sacrifice that had no explosion, no monument, no final stand. But choice did. It echoed. Carter felt it 3 days later while calibrating a deep space sensor array. A fluctuation passed through the data, subtle enough to miss if you weren't looking for patterns that shouldn't exist. She froze. That's not interference, she whispered. That's stabilization. Daniel was at her side in seconds. Natural? She shook her head. Natural, but guided, like a river settling into a new course after a flood. Teal'c felt it on a distant world, standing among former Jaffa who no longer wore marks of any god. A moment of hesitation passed through the crowd as an argument threatened to turn violent. Then it didn't. Not because someone intervened, because someone paused. O'Neill noticed it last, which annoyed him. He was in the briefing room, mid-rant, when he realized everyone was listening instead of reacting. He stopped talking. Well, he muttered, that's unsettling. The galaxy adjusted, slowly, quietly, without instruction. The Goa old remnants fractured beyond repair. Without inevitability to lean on, their threats rang hollow. Attempts at reconquest stalled not due to superior force, but due to uncertainty. Worlds did not rise up in glorious rebellion. They simply stopped complying. Stargates were no longer symbols of fear. They became tools again, messy, dangerous, human, as they were always meant to be. Carter compiled reports she never thought she'd read. Conflict de-escalated without mediation. Negotiations failed, then resumed. Cultures argued, changed their minds, argued again. History resumed being inefficient. Daniel smiled every time. He left fingerprints, Daniel said one evening, staring at a star map filled with small, independent movements. Not marks, tendencies. O'Neill leaned back in his chair. Yeah, like teaching a kid to ride a bike, then letting go. Teal'c inclined his head. He no longer runs ahead, he runs alongside. They felt him sometimes, not as a presence, as an allowance. Moments where time seemed to breathe, where panic slowed just enough for someone to choose differently, where catastrophe narrowed to consequence instead of collapse. Barry was not watching. He was not guiding. He was remembering. The speed force changed with him, no longer an engine of motion. It became a current of continuity. A reminder threaded through space-time that movement meant nothing without intent. In one distant system, an ancient device long thought inert finally powered down, its purpose fulfilled. The ancients themselves did not speak. They simply stepped back. For the first time since their ascension, the future was not something they needed to manage. On Earth, months passed. The SGC continued. Missions launched. People were lost. People were saved. Mistakes were made. Jack O'Neill still complained. Carter still overworked. Daniel still believed too much. Teal'c still stood between who he was and who he was becoming. Life went on. One night, long after the base lights dimmed, Carter stood alone in the gate room. She held a handheld sensor Barry had helped design. It hummed softly, attuned not to energy, but to variance. A faint reading flickered. She smiled through tears. "Still here," she whispered. The reading faded. Elsewhere, on a world that had never known Earth, a child stood at the edge of a village, watching the sky. She hesitated before crossing a river swollen from recent storms. Time slowed just enough. She waited. The river receded. She crossed safely. No miracle, just patience. Across the galaxy, that same quiet correction played out again and again, not saving everyone, saving enough. Barry Allen did not become a god. He became a boundary, a living proof that power could choose not to dominate, that speed could choose not to outrun consequence, that the universe did not need to be fixed, only trusted. And somewhere within the endless flow of moments, Barry felt it. Not loneliness, not regret, completion. He had run faster than light, faster than time, but the most important step he ever took was the one where he stopped. Barry Allen did not experience time the way he once had. There was no forward momentum, no rush of wind, no constant pressure to move before something broke. Instead, there was awareness, a layered sensation of moments stacked gently atop one another, like pages resting instead of turning. He existed in the space between decisions, not trapped, not free, present. The Speed Force no longer pulled at him. It listened. Barry realized slowly that it always had. He remembered Earth, but not as a place he needed to return to. He remembered it as a rhythm, the way days stumbled forward imperfectly, the way people failed, recovered, tried again. The Stargate universe had taught him something his own never had, that not every tragedy was a crisis meant for him alone, that some pain was part of becoming. From his vantage, Barry could feel fractures smoothing out, not erased, integrated. Timelines that once screamed under paradox now hummed quietly, accepting uncertainty instead of resisting it. He had not repaired the universe. He had taught it restraint. On Earth, the SGC adapted faster than anyone expected. New protocols quietly replaced old assumptions. Evacuation plans accounted for failure instead of prevention. Intelligence emphasized patience over dominance. Carter noticed something remarkable in long-term projections. The wars were lasting longer and killing fewer people. She struggled with that at first. Then she understood. Without decisive, unnatural interventions, conflicts resolved through exhaustion, diplomacy, compromise, messy solutions, human solutions, solutions that lasted. Daniel noticed it too in cultural studies. Mythologies changed, gods faded. Stories stopped centering on saviors descending from the sky and started focusing on communities surviving together. He wrote an entire paper on it. It was classified immediately. Teal'c felt the shift most deeply. Among the Jaffa, stories of gods were being replaced by stories of warriors who chose mercy, of leaders who stepped down, of battles that were avoided. Freedom had stopped being dramatic. It had become normal. Jack O'Neill hated that word. "Normal," he said once, staring at a report that described a Goa old remnant surrendering without a fight. That's never a good sign. But even he couldn't argue with the results. The galaxy was quieter, not safe, but honest. Months later, an ancient outpost on the edge of the Pegasus galaxy activated for the first time in millions of years. Its message was simple, not a warning, not a prophecy, a confirmation. The flow is stable. No one knew who it was meant for. But Carter felt something ease when she read it. Barry sensed that too. He understood then that his presence was no longer required. The Speed Force was no longer compensating. It was complete. He felt himself begin to drift, not away, inward. The way a runner slows after a long race, muscles finally releasing tension they didn't know they were holding. For the first time since the particle accelerator explosion that changed his life, Barry Allen felt truly at rest. He thought of O'Neill's sarcasm, Carter's brilliance, Daniel's stubborn hope, Teal'c's quiet strength. Mortals, fragile, unstoppable. He smiled. In the SGC gate room, the Stargate activated unexpectedly. No incoming traveler, no dialed address, just a brief red-gold shimmer that lasted less than a second. Sensors spiked, then normalized. Carter stared at the readings, heart racing. "It wasn't a wormhole," she said softly. Daniel swallowed. "Then what was it?" She looked at the gate. "A goodbye." The event horizon never formed. The gate fell silent again. Jack stood behind them, hands in his pockets. "Well," he said quietly, "at least he didn't blow anything up on the way out." Teal'c inclined his head. He honored this universe. They stood there for a long moment. No ceremony, no speech, just acceptance. Across the galaxy, life continued. People argued, loved, failed, tried again. Time moved forward, uneven and imperfect, as it should. And somewhere beyond measurement, Barry Allen faded not into nothingness, but into the rule that now governed the stars. That speed must yield to wisdom. That power must serve choice. That the universe does not need saving. It needs trust. The galaxy did not celebrate its survival. There were no grand announcements, no monuments erected in orbit, no worlds declared officially free. History simply kept going. That, more than anything else, was Barry Allen's legacy. At the SGC, life settled into a rhythm that felt almost unfamiliar. Missions no longer came with the same sense of impending collapse. Threat assessments shifted from existential to manageable. Dangerous, yes, but not apocalyptic. Carter noticed it first in the simulations. Projected worst-case scenarios no longer ended in cascading failures. There were losses. There were compromises. But there were no longer lines that read total system collapse. "That shouldn't be possible," she said quietly, staring at the data late one night. Daniel looked over her shoulder. "Why not?" "Because the galaxy is hostile," she replied. "It always has been. You don't just fix that." Daniel smiled faintly. "You don't. You adapt to it." The Jaffa councils formed without bloodshed. That shocked everyone. Teal'c attended the first gathering not as a warrior, but as an observer. Former First Primes sat beside former slaves. Arguments erupted. Old wounds reopened. But no one reached for a weapon. The absence of gods had left a vacuum, and instead of rushing to fill it, they hesitated. They learned something new: responsibility. Teal'c spoke only once during that meeting. "We believed obedience was strength," he said calmly. "We were wrong. Strength is choosing what comes next. Those words spread faster than any rebellion. In the weeks that followed, Goa'uld remnants attempted to reclaim authority. They arrived with ships, weapons, threats, and found themselves ignored. World after world refused to kneel, not because they expected rescue, but because they had already accepted the cost of saying no. Jack O'Neill read the reports with growing disbelief. "They're not fighting," he said. "They're just not cooperating." Carter nodded. "It's economic, logistical, cultural resistance. No supply chains, no worship, no fear." Jack blinked. "You're telling me the galaxy figured out passive resistance?" Daniel looked up from his notes. "Looks like it," Jack sighed. "Great. The universe got smarter when I wasn't looking." There were still wars. There were still atrocities. But something fundamental had shifted. The idea that someone would always arrive in time had vanished, and in its place grew preparation. Barry felt none of this directly, but he sensed the consequences. The Speed Force had quieted into something like a tide. It moved, but no longer surged, no longer tore holes through reality to compensate for imbalance. He realized then that the Speed Force had never been about speed. It had been about correction, and now correction was no longer needed. Barry drifted through memories not as anchors, but as acknowledgments. Earth, Central City, the SGC, the gate. He remembered the first moment he had stepped out of the event horizon and felt time stutter around him. The way Carter's instruments screamed. The way O'Neill's instincts kicked in before his fear. They had trusted him, not because he was powerful, but because he had stopped when asked. That trust mattered more than any victory. On a distant world, long classified as hostile, an SG team negotiated a ceasefire that would once have failed instantly. The local leader hesitated, weighing the risks. "There will be no miracle," said. O'Neill replied without missing a beat. "Nope, just us. Take it or leave it." The leader chose to take it. Carter documented the event, then paused before submitting the report. She added a single line at the end. "Outcome achieved without temporal anomaly or external intervention." She smiled at the understatement. Late one evening, Daniel stood alone in the gate room. He rested a hand on the cold metal of the ring, feeling the faint vibration beneath it. "Hope you're enjoying the quiet," he murmured. The gate did not respond, but somewhere, something eased. Barry Allen no longer ran, and because of that, the universe finally learned how to walk on its own. Years passed, not evenly, not kindly, but honestly. The Stargate program evolved into something quieter than it had ever been before, less reactionary, less desperate. The mission briefings no longer began with the phrase worst-case scenario. Instead, they began with impact assessment. What will this change, and who pays the price? That question reshaped everything. Carter spearheaded the development of predictive ethics models, not simulations of success, but simulations of consequence. If a civilization was uplifted too quickly, instability followed. If a tyrant was removed without preparation, chaos filled the void. Speed, they learned, was rarely mercy. Daniel became the unofficial conscience of the program. He traveled more than ever, not to excavate ruins, but to sit in councils and listen. He spoke less. He learned more. Cultures remembered. Teal'c became something the Jaffa had never known before. An elder, not a ruler, not a symbol, a guide. When asked why he did not claim leadership, he answered simply, "I served gods who demanded obedience. I will not become one." Jack O'Neill remained Jack O'Neill, which somehow mattered more than anyone expected. He retired twice, came back 3 times. Every time the galaxy threatened to spiral, he showed up with a coffee mug and a look that said he'd seen worse. And usually, he had. The Goa'uld became history, not erased, not forgotten, studied. Children learned about them the way Earth once learned about empires, as warnings, not myths. The ancients remained silent. That silence was no longer ominous. It was respectful. The Speed Force no longer brushed against this universe. It had no need to. Barry Allen existed now as a memory embedded in probability, a gentle resistance against extremes. When events leaned too far toward catastrophe, something slowed them just enough for choice to intervene. Not always, not perfectly, but enough. On one world, a rebellion nearly turned genocidal. It didn't. On another, a peace treaty nearly collapsed. It didn't. People still died, but fewer. And those who lived understood why. One day, long after SG-1 had become legend rather than active unit, a young scientist at the SGC discovered something odd, a pattern. She brought it to Carter, now grayer, calmer, no longer surprised by impossible things. It's not temporal, the scientist said. It's statistical. Carter studied the data. Moments where catastrophic decisions were abandoned at the last second. Moments where hesitation saved lives. Moments where restraint outweighed impulse. She closed the file. He taught the universe patience, she said quietly. The scientist frowned. Who did? Carter smiled. Someone very fast. The Stargate activated less often these days. Worlds had learned to communicate without it. Trade routes formed. Diplomacy replaced panic. When the gate did activate, it was almost always for help, not conquest. Daniel once joked that the universe had grown up. No one laughed. They all knew what it had cost. In the quiet between stars, Barry Allen finally let go of the last tether. He did not disappear. He resolved. The Speed Force became a background constant, like gravity, like time itself, unseen, unfelt, necessary. If anyone listened closely enough, they might have heard a whisper in moments where rushing would have ruined everything. Slow down, choose, trust. And the universe, scarred but wiser, listened. The universe did not remain kind. It remained fair. That distinction mattered. New threats emerged, as they always did. Not gods this time. Not false divinity cloaked in myth and fear. These enemies were quieter, more subtle. Corporations spanning star systems. Artificial intelligences optimizing civilizations into stagnation. Ideologies that promise safety at the cost of choice. Problems without faces. Problems that could not be punched, outpaced, or dismantled in seconds. The SGC faced them the way it had learned to face everything else. Carefully. Carter retired from field work, but never from thinking. Her office became a nexus for impossible questions. She no longer asked how fast something could be solved, but whether it should be solved at all. She taught a new generation of scientists who had never known a galaxy ruled by gods. That worried her more than she admitted. Daniel became an ambassador without ever officially accepting the title. He spoke for cultures who had no voice and listened to ones that had too many. He reminded councils that history was not a straight line toward progress. It was a spiral, and spirals could tighten or expand depending on choices. Teal'c outlived most of those who first followed him. When he died, it was not in battle. It was in peace. His funeral was attended by humans, Jaffa, Tok'ra, and beings whose species names were still difficult to pronounce. They did not chant prayers to gods. They told stories. Jack O'Neill attended quietly, leaning on a cane he pretended not to need. He listened more than he spoke. At the end, he placed a staff weapon symbol at Teal'c's resting place. "About time," he murmured. "You earned the rest." Time passed. Eventually, even Jack left. The SGC became a historical institution, its walls filled with artifacts and records instead of alarms. The gate remained operational, but it was no longer the galaxy's emergency exit. It was a bridge, and bridges implied consent. Long after the last SG team disbanded, a scholar studying ancient anomalies noticed something strange buried deep within temporal data. A constant, a limit. No matter how advanced a civilization became, no matter how much power it wielded, attempts to alter foundational moments always failed. Not catastrophically, quietly, as if reality itself resisted being rushed. The scholar published the findings under a simple name, the Allen threshold. No explanation followed. None was needed. In the farthest reaches of space-time, Barry Allen existed as little more than a tendency, a preference embedded into the universe's operating principles. Momentum was allowed, acceleration was allowed, but bypassing consequence was not. He no longer thought in words, but if he had, he might have smiled. Because this was what he had always wanted, not to be needed, but to be unnecessary. The universe no longer waited for someone to fix it. It fixed itself, slowly, imperfectly, together. Long after the last alarms fell silent, long after the last emergency protocol was archived instead of rehearsed, the universe continued, not triumphantly, not peacefully, simply forward. That alone would have once been considered a miracle. On Earth, the Stargate facility stood unchanged for years after its final official mission. The mountain remained sealed, guarded not by soldiers, but by caretakers. The gate room lights were kept on. The control consoles were maintained. The ramp was polished. No one said why. Everyone understood. It was not nostalgia. It was humility. The gate had once been a weapon, a lifeline, a temptation, a promise that no matter how badly things went, someone could always leave, or arrive, or intervene. Now it was a reminder of restraint. General Carter visited the facility often in her retirement. She never brought a camera, never brought guests. She would stand in the control room, hands clasped behind her back, and look down at the ring. Sometimes she imagined she could still hear the faint echo of vibration beneath it. Not energy, not activation, possibility. She had spent her life learning how things worked. Barry Allen had taught her when not to make them work faster. Daniel Jackson taught history until the end, not as a warning, as context. He insisted his students learn about the Goa'uld not as villains, but as inevitabilities that arose when power outpaced accountability. When asked what ended the age of false gods, he never mentioned Thor, or weapons, or rebellions. He said it ended when people learned to wait. Teal'c's name became something spoken carefully among the Jaffa, not in reverence, in gratitude. He was remembered not for victories, but for refusals. Refusals to rule, refusals to dominate, refusals to become what he had overthrown. His teaching spread quietly through generations. The idea that freedom did not require spectacle, that dignity did not need permission. Jack O'Neill's legacy was harder to define. Official records described him as a commander, a strategist, a diplomat against his will. Unofficially, he was remembered as the man who always asked the question no one else wanted to answer. What happens next? That question outlived him. The Stargate was eventually opened to the public. Not fully, not casually, but enough. Children walked through exhibits showing worlds once enslaved and now self-governed. They saw the ring and learned it was once humanity's greatest risk. They were taught that it was never destiny that saved them. It was restraint. Across the galaxy, civilizations matured unevenly. Some rose too quickly and collapsed. Others stagnated. Many found balance only after loss. But something fundamental remained unchanged. No one expected rescue. That expectation had vanished. And with it, something dangerous had gone with it. The belief that suffering could be erased instead of addressed. The belief that consequences could be outrun. The belief that time owed anyone mercy. Barry Allen no longer existed as a being, but he existed as resistance. A gentle drag on the fabric of reality that made impossible shortcuts fail quietly. Not catastrophically, not dramatically, just enough. Time became less forgiving of arrogance, more forgiving of patience. Ancient technology ceased responding to reckless activation. Devices that once bent causality simply refused to cooperate unless approached carefully, collaboratively, as if the universe itself had learned to say no. The ancients never returned, not because they were gone, because they were unnecessary. Their greatest fear had been realized not through catastrophe, but through success. Younger civilizations no longer needed shepherds. They needed accountability. In one quiet moment on a forgotten world, a leader stood before a Stargate they had uncovered in ruins. Their advisors argued for exploration, conquest, expansion. The leader listened, then ordered the gate sealed, not destroyed, preserved, for later. The decision was controversial. It saved millions. No one connected it to Barry Allen, but the hesitation was his echo. Time flowed on. Stars died. New ones formed. The universe aged without hurry, and in that vast, indifferent continuation, something remarkable endured. Choice, not perfect, not kind, but free. If anyone could have seen the Speed Force then, they would not have recognized it as energy or motion. It was stillness, balance, a silence that allowed moments to mean something. Barry Allen had once believed his greatest fear was not being fast enough. He learned instead that the greatest danger was arriving too soon. The galaxy learned that lesson with him, and because of that, it survived. Not because it was saved, but because it was trusted to be